Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Camille put a tray of pies in the oven, wiped her forehead with a corner of her kerchief, and sat down at the table. Leaned back in her chair, she led the kitchen with her gaze, assessing the results of her work. Soup ready, cutlets on fried. Mashed potatoes on mint wrapped in a warm shawl, resting on the edge of the stove. The mimosa salad is ready. Stands in the refrigerator, prescribed vegetables on vinaigrette cooked, and already cooled. It remains only to peel them and chop the salad, and everything is ready. Just by that time, the pies will come up. Don't forget to take the compote out of the cellar and put it in the fridge. And put the kvass in the same place to cool down from the road. It's always nice to drink a mug of cold kvass. Camille got up and went to the veranda to get a jar of kvass. It was cool on the veranda and a light breeze blew through the closed doors. Hearing the curtains, it lightly rubbed anything hung on the door against the flies. Camille leaned over to tighten the corner, the curtains, and when you saw that from the gate to her porch walks neighbor Emily. "Hello, Camille." The woman greeted her. "I see you've been on a roll this morning. You must be expecting company." Camille, on the side, let the neighbor into the house and carefully held the net on the door behind her. "I don't want any more flies in the house." "Hello, Emily." She nodded. "Come to the vase, I'll pour. I have guests tonight." "Yes, that's right. You guessed it. The kids are coming." The neighbor sat down to the table and nodded. "Thanks to a mug of kvass." I looked at the kitchen. "They're not coming alone, are they?" she asked. "Are they bringing friends or bridegrooms?" "No, not alone." Camille shrugged. "They didn't say anything like that, at least, though they might pick up someone at the last moment. With them it happens so where, what only uncooked." Emily wondered. "You could feed a company of soldiers here. Do you think it's too much?" Camille said doubtfully. "I wanted to chop up some vinaigrette. Evelyn likes it. No problem. If they don't eat it tomorrow, I'll take it with me. I don't have time to cook in the city. It'll come in handy. You know, Emily, I can't cook little by little. I can't get used to it." A few years ago, Camille Milne had a large family. Her mother and father lived in a rustic house. She and her husband Sebastian, and their two children, daughter Evelyn and son Kevin. 3 generations under one roof lived peacefully, friendly, happy, and prosperous. The first house left Evelyn, went to the city, studying at the medical university. The girl from the age of 10 dreamed of becoming a pediatrician, and diligently went to the realization of his dream. Camille and Sebastian consulted with their parents and bought their daughter an apartment in the city, so she wouldn't have to go to the hostels, a one-room apartment. But it's enough for the girl for the first time. And then how will she get married? Let her and her husband think how to expand. The older generation decided. 2 years after Evelyn left, Camille's mother died. She suddenly went to bed one day and never got up again. The woman was only 74 years old. She had never complained about her health, so her death came as a surprise to the whole family. Hardest of all, Camille's father experienced her mother's passing. He married her when they were both 17 years old and was used to being close to her all his life. The death of his wife was a serious blow to the old man. After the funeral, he noticeably gave up, began to complain often. Then the heart, then the legs, then the lungs. Grandfather smoked. From the same 17 years and after the death of his wife, he began to cough a lot, above with a squeak and with a thick mouth. He outlived his wife by only 11 months. He passed on. After burying both parents within a year, Camille bolted. Without her father and mother, the house began to feel empty, and her heart grew dreary. She wasn't used to being separated from her parents for long. They almost always lived together, but life did not allow her to be sad for long. First, her son Kevin graduated from high school. Exams, graduation, moving to the city. All these troubles took over the woman. Then Evelyn graduated. Graduation again, state exams. graduation, job hunting. And then Sebastian's husband suddenly fell ill. What he was complaining about, I couldn't understand. Somehow it was bad, but I can't explain, as he said. Here and there the office would pull, and then everything seemed fine. Camille made her husband undergo a full examination at the hospital in the district center. However, it did not bring clarity. Not that the doctors in the rural clinic were not too qualified, not that the equipment did not allow to conduct the necessary research. It's unclear. Sebastian, meanwhile, it's a big blow, and looking noticeably worse than before. The Milne couple went into town. Evelyn took in her father's appearance. She got all her fellow students and university professors on the horn. She pushed for appointments at the most modern clinics, examinations, and the best equipment. Eventually, the cause of Sebastian's poor condition was identified, but it brought no joy to anyone. Oncology. A malignant tumor in the intestine, which metastasized to many parts of the body, including the bones. Sebastian was prescribed treatment, but warned at once that it is more supportive to remove cancer from the body at this stage is impossible. But to prolong the life of the patient for a couple of 3 years can still be tried, and they tried on injections of chemotherapy and regular radiation. Sebastian Milne lived for another 3 years after his diagnosis. In the last months, he did not travel anywhere, did not leave the house further than his own yard, and often did not get out of bed at all. But before that, he remained quite active. He worked, socialized with his relatives and children, put his affairs in order. And Camille hoped to the last that everything would be all right and her husband would recover. That's why she couldn't get used to his death for a long time. After burying her husband, the woman was left alone and struggled to get used to the empty house. The children stayed in town. The son came for vacations, and the two of them and their sister tried to visit their mother every weekend, or at least every other weekend. Camille always prepared diligently and happily for their visit. Sometimes the children brought friends with them, and then the house would come alive again, becoming noisy and cheerful. The woman loved such visits most of all, and always secretly hoped for them. And she always cooked in abundance just in anticipation of possible friends and friends of Evelyn and Kevin. The company of young people always lifted her spirits, helped her to keep herself in tone, and not to slip into the abyss of depression. This time, the children came alone. And judging by the look on their faces as they unloaded from the car, they'd had a little argument on the way, or at least a serious argument. Evelyn ran up to her mother, gave her a hasty peck on the cheek, and immediately spoke. "Mom, but do you have any idea what he's come up with? It's impossible." "Yes, wait." "Literature with good-natured mockery," said Kevin. "Let us at least say hello first." He was 5 years younger than John, but in some unfathomable way he managed to behave with her as if she were a little sister. Kevin leisurely approached his mother, hugged her, and kissed her on the cheek. "Mommy, hello," he said affectionately. "It's all right. I'll tell you everything. There's no crime. Don't worry, Evelyn." He turned to his sister. "You can help me unload the bags from the car. I can't carry all this stuff by myself." "What bags?" Camille was surprised. "We brought you some goodies," smiled the son. "My, you're feeding us." "Because I overslept today. I didn't even have time for breakfast." "Of course, my son. Of course he's worried." "Camille, I've got everything ready." She rushed into the house and started setting the table. The children brought into the kitchen a dozen store bags filled with household cleaning products and various household trifles. There were stores in the village, but they were not very good. To buy a decent washing powder or any spices other than pepper and mustard, you had to go to the district center. And this was not always convenient for Camille, who was left without a car after her husband's death. Therefore, the children made it a habit to bring everything they needed from the city. The woman periodically tried to return the money spent on the gifts, but the brother and sister invariably refused, even though they sometimes had to quarrel with their mother over it. So this time, Evelyn waved her hand dismissively. Mom was no more offended. She almost forced Camille to put the purse away. They sorted out the bags, finished lunch. We had pies and compote. And then Kevin said, "Mom, well, I've decided to leave school for a while. I'm taking a leave of absence to work for a while." "What's wrong?" Camille shook her hands. "Didn't you pass? I thought you said you were done." "Sessions are fine," nodded the son. "I just feel like I've lost interest in this specialty. I need to think about it, sort myself out, get my thoughts in order. Don't worry about it. I already got a job. I start Wednesday. The company sells computers and parts. They need a storekeeper for them. Federal company just came to our area. It's all white, all official. The salary isn't bad, but it's a 5-day week. You can't combine it with your studies." "That's good, of course," Camille said thoughtfully. "But Kevin, you've only got 1 more year to go. It's a shame to drop out in the 5th year." "That's what I'm saying," said Evelyn. "You should have gotten your degree by now. And then do whatever you want. Wouldn't you lose a year?" "It would take a year to get a degree in a field I'll never work in." Kevin raised an eyebrow ironically. "No way, sis, that's not for me." Evelyn pouted. She herself had never gone to work in a hospital or clinic after graduating from medical school. Camille was surprised by her daughter's choice. She remembered that Evelyn had been planning to become a pediatrician since the 5th grade, and all the time she had been in school, she had paid extra attention to the subjects she would need for admission. But Evelyn was able to explain her position to her mother. "You see," she said, "I love kids and I'd love to work with them, but every kid has a parent. And that's a living hell. There's almost no one with any sense. They all think they're smarter than the doctor all the time. They argue and make up their own diagnosis. They don't agree with the treatment. They complain. What did you give them? Not the drug they wanted. Or you gave them a massage, and it's inconvenient for them to go to it. Today, all parents treat their children or advice from the internet, or on the precepts of their grandmothers with the help of folk medicine. And it is still unclear what is worse, Baba baby to feed from 2 months or mother's milk to wash his eyes. Yes, wash to cataracts. And then the pediatrician is to blame. Did not warn Mom. I have no nerves are not enough to work with such parents." Evelyn had time to evaluate the parents of her future patients during her university internship. And then, having received her diploma, she went to the courses of a massage therapist. Having learned the basic techniques of massage, she began to practice on acquaintances, friends, former classmates, and even her own brother. Gradually, she improved her qualifications, mastering, in addition to the general, strengthening, and relaxing massages, also cosmetic, anti-cellulite or drainage, promoting weight loss sports, and even therapeutic. With the acquisition of new skills grew on the client base of the girl. Sociable, cheerful, shallow with strong hands, with a medical background. Evelyn quickly gained clients, and soon she didn't even need to advertise her services. She was passed from hand to hand, recommended as an excellent specialist. It was not uncommon for families to have her services. Evelyn was making a great living. She renovated the apartment her parents bought. She had done excellent repairs and bought new furniture. She regularly helped her mother and brother with money. And in the last year, she had been thinking about buying a car. It was difficult to get around to clients who lived in different parts of the city. Taking public transportation was becoming increasingly inconvenient. In general, Evelyn thought that life was successful and she had chosen the right profession. What's not working in her specialty? So now Mom is a girl, poked in the direction of her brother and turned to her mother. "Mom, I'm telling you for sure. If he goes to academy now, he won't come back to university. So at least he'd have a diploma, even if not to work on it, but still a higher education." Nick from, "What makes you think I won't come back?" My brother was surprised. "I just want to think about whether I need this higher education and whether I need to go back there. We have a couple of majors related to mine, and I can transfer there or I can go back and finish my studies here. I don't know yet. I'm telling you I need a break." Camille sighed. She understood why her son had made this decision, and she also understood that there was nothing she could do to help her boy. He has to deal with this stage of life on his own. Evelyn is not big, the woman said tiredly. If Kevin has decided so, then so be it. He's a grown-up guy. He's already capable of taking responsibility for his own decisions. Let him do as he knows how. Thank you, Mom, Kevin said with feeling. I was sure you'd support me. In the evening, after putting the children to bed, Camille sat on the porch for a long time looking up at the night sky. She was unhappy with her son's decision to leave the university, but she realized there was nothing she could do about it. It was useless to persuade him, and there was no point in forbidding him. Kevin was long past the age of prohibition, and so was Evelyn. Camille was sure that her son would not return to his studies, but the only thing she could do now was to support his decision. She hoped that with a year's sabbatical, she would be able to convince him to get his diploma. She could think of no other solution. Camille understood what was happening to her son until now. Even though it had been 2 years, he had not been able to cope with his father's death. In the Milne family, Sebastian was the real head of the family. His authority was unquestionable. He was by no means a domestic tyrant. The man treated everyone in the household with respect. He took care of everyone, equally tried to make sure that his loved ones did not need anything. In any situation, he listened to the opinion of each of his relatives. But the last word always remained with him. That's just the way it was. Camille was not a downtrodden housewife at all. She worked because she wanted to work. She ran the household as she saw fit. She didn't have to account to her husband for expenses, free time, and child-rearing methods. It was just that she, like everyone else in the house, had gotten used to having Sebastian, the hope and support, the very linchpin around which the whole family paid. He knew how to do any job without dividing it into men's and women's work. He was able to solve any problems from material to mental. Next to him, it was always reliable and calm. Children in the family, Milne, were brought up in respect for their father, and always, no matter what happened, were confident in him, his support, his help. Naturally, when Sebastian was gone, the sibling world had developed a serious crack. But it was easier with Evelyn. She and her mother had been to the funeral and cried heartily for 9 days. They started to figure out how to move on. If you felt sad, you could always sit next to her or in front of Sebastian's picture and cry like a woman, and the pain would go away for a while. But this therapy didn't work with Kevin. For the first time after his father's death, the guy was some kind of frozen inhibition without emotion. He didn't shed a tear at the funeral, just hugged and comforted his mother and sister. And then, even after a little while, he'd get over everything, shifted his grief inside himself, but could not get rid of it. Kevin strengthened himself in front of his mother and sister. He tried to behave as usual. But sometimes Camille, the bastard, poured it into the moments when the guy thought no one saw him and noticed on his face confusion, helplessness, and pain. She didn't know how to help. She tried only to be more affectionate to her son, to support him in everything. Now she realized that Kevin simply had no energy left for studying. He was too exhausted by inner worries. If it were possible to simply take the grief from her son and live it instead of Kevin, she could cope, could do it. But alas, with such troubles each person must cope independently. It cannot be passed on to others. Camille thought that she had bought her son a separate apartment for nothing. Kevin lived with Evelyn for the first years of school. Yes, the apartment was one room, but brother and sister always got along well with each other and got along well together. After her husband's death, Camille decided that she could afford to buy another apartment for Kevin. First of all, she thought, it was time for the kids to get on with their lives. Evelyn's in her early 30s, and Kevin's a big boy. Living together in one room of the novel will not be neither Kevin girl to bring, nor John fiancé to invite, and even just with friends to get together will not work. Sooner or later you will have to solve this issue anyway, so why not now? And in the second place, Milne hoped that the search for an apartment and the subsequent putting it in order somehow distracted Kevin to disgorge him will be the thing that will pull the son out of the longing for his father. To some extent, her calculation had paid off. Kevin actively participated in the search for a new home. With interest went to viewings. Carefully and intelligently assessed the advantages and disadvantages of each of the options. After the deal, he moved from his sister into his own Khrushchevka and began to make repairs in it. Evelyn almost immediately had an affair with one of her former classmates, and it seems would soon move out with him. And then, God willing, she would get married. For her daughter Camille was only happy. But here is a son while he lived with his sister and still somehow distracted from his grief troubles. Cozy Evelyn constantly breaking him then, demanding help in the household, then pulling him out for some walks to the movies to sit down. They even have a tradition that Kevin meets her from late orders and brings her home by transportation or cab or car. It didn't matter. It all kept the guy motivated to keep up. After the move, Kevin had no such drive. He, of course, diligently engaged in repair and has already put in order the kitchen, bathroom, and corridor of the apartment. What did he buy the walls in the room for? But household chores were clearly not enough to keep him afloat. Needed a person next to a person who understood his condition, able to share his grief. Support the guy. Evelyn had handled it for a while, but from a distance, letting a couple of blocks away to provide support, it had become more difficult. She'd seen her brother's condition, of course, and tried to keep a hand on his pulse. Called him every day, visited him regularly. Discreetly monitored his acquaintances, fearing that the guy in a desire to get rid of depression will sit on alcohol or some substances. But it wasn't enough, so Kevin couldn't take it anymore. He ran out of energy, even for the institute, and his friends were mostly college friends. I thought Camille would drop out. Who will he socialize with? He needs someone to be around, to give him a background. At least he could make friends with someone at work. The woman sighed. In principle, her boyfriend is cheerful, sociable, friendly. God willing, there will be new buddies, will help him through this black streak in life. And it would be better, of course, a girl found. Love it helps to survive any adversity, thought the woman. And the age is already suitable. You can think about marriage. And if Kevin gets married, there will be no time to be sad. About marriage, Kevin Milne did not even think. Moreover, he considered this event for himself impossible. In the first place, because the romance with girls required mental strength, and the guy recently simply did not have them. He easily got acquainted with girls, easily attracted them, being intelligent, friendly, and not without a sense of humor. He was even fond of some of them himself. But after a week of other communication, Kevin usually realized that he was unbearably tired of the new girlfriend. At first, he just disappeared from the sight of girls. But over time, he decided that wasn't quite fair, and learned to reduce the relationship to nothing, to transfer them to a friendly or buddy rails. By the time he was 22 years old, the guy became a master of easy, non-committal flirting, and it did not upset Kevin too much, because he and only he alone in the world knew about the second reason why neither marriage nor a long, serious romance was impossible for him. A wife, like a steady girlfriend, needed to be slept with, and that was something the guy had a big problem with. Kevin found this out when he was in his second year of study. Previously, girls were not of much interest to him. At school, he was just friends with his classmates. At university, due to his specialty, he was surrounded mostly by guys. There were only 3 girls on their course, and all of them were already taken by the end of the first year. Kevin could probably hit it off. One of them would start right away. But for the first year and a half, the guy was busy just settling in at uni. Yes, and in general to adjust to city life. And then you couldn't count on classmates. It was Kevin who first fell seriously in love. By the middle of the second year with Jenna, he met at a student party and was conquered by her at first sight. The girl was not a stunning beauty, but there was something in her features, in her lively pilot, in her slim and agile figure, something that intentionally drew Kevin's gaze to her. Light, cheerful, spontaneous, mischievous. She reminded him of a curious chick who had recently learned to fly, and was now checking every second to see what else his wings could do. Kevin did not leave the girl all the evening, and at the end of the party went to walk her home. In the end, the guys walked until the morning and parted reluctantly, feeling that not everything has not yet told each other. They started dating. They spent all their free time together. Kevin brought the girl to his sister's house several times. He himself was at her house, met her parents, and even became friends with her younger brother. Walks, dates, and a kiss. A few months went by. One day, Jenna invited Kevin over for a sleepover. Her family was going to visit relatives for the weekend, and the apartment was vacant. Kevin bought flowers and a bottle of wine and flew to the girl as if on wings, not suspecting that this evening their romance would end ignominiously. The dinner went beautifully. But when the young people were in bed, it turned out that Kevin was completely unfit for sex. His body refused to respond to Ken's touch and caresses. Jenna already had some experience in sexual relations, so she tried to excite the guy as much as she could. But after half an hour of effort, the girl just cried and screamed, "You lie to me all the time," she howled. "You don't like me. You don't really want me at all. You think I'm ugly." Kevin was shocked at his own body's betrayal. He liked the girl. He was in love with her, fascinated by her. He wanted to want her. And he categorically did not understand what was happening. Attempts to calm the girl down had gotten him nowhere. Jenna simply kicked the suitors out the door, barely letting him get dressed. The next days, she did not answer the phone, did not show up at school. And when Kevin still managed to track her down near her house, she made a scandal with demands not to approach her. The guy didn't have time to explain. And to be honest, he didn't know how to explain what had happened. One thing he knew for sure was that he was done with Jenna. With a technical mind, Kevin began to explore his own body. He used all the pornographic movies, striptease, bars, OBL, madness with girls, unencumbered by moral principles, whom he met in bars. Remembering that he and Jenna had been drinking wine that unfortunate evening, the guy conducted some of the experiments sober, and before some of them he drank a couple of bottles of beer or other alcohol of different strength. The result was always the same. Excitement would occur for 1.5 to 2 minutes and then disappear. Kevin was embarrassed and confused. He didn't want to take on the role of an impotent 20-year-old. After thinking, ordering the embarrassment deeper and gathering all the willpower in a fist, the guy made an appointment with a urologist. At the student polyclinic, the doctor listened to the complaints, examined the patient. He questioned him for a while, then began to explain the data. What is the reason for the inappropriate behavior of the body? Kevin listened diligently to the doctor, but whether from fright or embarrassment, he understood little. The only thing he could grasp was that he needed a small operation. "It's treatable," the doctor said. "It's not a sentence. One small operation. You can even do it under local anesthesia, and everything will be back to normal. There's a short recovery period of about a month. But there's one thing that's not covered by the HMO. It will have to be paid for out of your own pocket." The figure named by the doctor could not please any student, even those who receive an increased scholarship like Kevin. But it turned out that without the operation, intimacy could be forgotten, and therefore life in general. At least that's how it seemed to the 20-year-old. Kevin thanked the doctor, collected the papers and appointments, and left the office. He needed to consult with someone, to tell someone about what had happened. But who? Talking to his mother or sister about such things was out of the question. It was necessary to have an adult, experienced man with whom one could talk in confidence in this environment. Only his father could be such a man. But the boy was ashamed. His father had been fighting cancer for years. Predatory diseases are slowly eating his body from the inside out. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of money. And then Kevin, as a young, healthy guy, comes to him to complain about the fact that he trivially does not stand. No, you can't even think about that. He'd have to come in with a runny nose, wouldn't he? And if his father gets the seriousness of the problem and gives him money for the operation, where would he get it? take it away from his treatment. That's the only way. Kevin didn't like that option. On the other hand, maybe he could do without the money. Maybe Dad would just tell him what to do, how to behave, where to find a cheaper clinic, how to get back in touch with Jenna. Just sympathize. Heck, that would be a huge help to Kevina already. While the guy was thinking about what to do, Sebastian Milne died. The problems of sex went to the background and reminded of themselves only a year and a half after the funeral. Kevin, tired of fighting the darkness inside alone, agreed to a friend's invitation and went to some party. After getting pretty drunk, he found himself on the balcony of someone else's apartment, hugging the strange girl, going on a bender. He thought, have a drink, go wild, spend the night with this girl. Why not? He listened to his body and remembered why not. His body was behaving as usual, not wanting to get aroused. Kevin, how'd you get rid of the girl? Did you go home? He was already living alone, so he didn't have to explain to his sister about coming home late drunk. Kevin spent the next month researching the city's logical and anthropological clinics. He made appointments and underwent examinations. Finally, he found a place where he could get the surgery he needed for relatively reasonable money. All that remained was to get the right amount of money, and the guy decided to earn it on his own. He took a leave of absence from his studies, found a place with a suitable salary, calculating that if you save half, then in a year and a half he will be able to save up for the procedure. And he began to save on everything he could, so that he could repair his body in less than a year. Not his mother, not his sister. Of course, he never told me the true reasons for leaving the university. The staff of the office where Kevin got a job was small. A director, a system administrator, 2 salesmen, and a storekeeper. Kevin himself. His superiors more than once offered him to take another loader in the warehouse for the assembly of especially large orders. But the guy refused, preferring to work part-time as a loader himself. He needed the money, and there were not too many orders so far, and it was quieter to pick up the goods yourself and release them yourself. You know for sure that there will be no confusion. Kevin quickly established good relations with his colleagues. He became especially good friends with one of the salesmen, Robert. The guys were the same age and bonded over their love of gothic culture, dark metal music, horror movies, and thriller games with relevant themes. For some reason, after his father's death, Kevin felt an interest in this culture. Not to the extent, of course, to dress up in black hoodies and call himself then in the external entourage. He did not see the appeal, but the theme of death attracted the guy. Robert, on the other hand, despite his gothic leanings, was a cheerful and friendly young man. Like Kevin, he was a newcomer, but he had not yet found a place of his own. He rented a room near the office and was always jealous of his buddy and his separate apartment. "You're a lucky man, Kevin," he said. "Your own place. It's a fire. You can bring girls over every day. But my landlady is like a Cerberus. Even if you invite someone to visit, she walks around, eavesdropping, afraid not to make any noise. No romantic atmosphere, you know. You don't appreciate it. What you have, you don't appreciate. Where do you get those girls?" Kevin joked. "From the customers. We only have mostly men coming home. I drive a car, you can't get acquainted on the bus. I'm at my mom's on weekends too. We're online dating," Robert proclaimed. "It's the most modern and stress-free way, I'll tell you. There are several city entertainment portals. They're often timed. It's like you and me in an ICQ on work correspondence. Only there is a conversation for several people at once. Whoever wants to come in and talk. That's where you get to know each other. If you like a girl, you set a meeting. And then it's a matter of technique. There's just one thing, but the girl can be scary." Robert made huge eyes, made a scary face. "Are there any pictures?" "No," Kevin wondered. "Well, not by default. You could, of course, ask for a picture before you meet. You know, like, how will I recognize you?" "Well, it's not like she's gonna send a picture of herself." "Well, whose is it? Maybe a picture of a cute friend. She could Photoshop her own. Or maybe just send a good photo of her from a good angle. You know, there are some people who look hot in photos, but in real life, they're mama. Kevin laughed, then said, thinking, but if the girl herself is interesting, and it is pleasant to communicate with her, then let her look as she wants. Well, yes, you can just socialize, Robert agreed, but you don't have to meet for that. We correspond at least every day, and that's all there is to it. By the way, there are many of them there too, who do not want to get acquainted, but just want to chat. Let me write you the address of the site. You'll see for yourself. That same evening, Kevin went to the chat room and a week later realized that he was suddenly drawn into such communication. It turned out that he didn't even realize how much he missed the opportunity to just talk to people about everything that was on his heart. With his mother and sister, despite the trustworthiness of the relationship, he still had to choose the topics and words. With his colleagues, we communicated in a friendly framework, which did not imply special frankness. And in the undercover chat room, meaning nothing. Nick, you could talk about anything. Joking, candor, outpourings and attacks, the hitchhiker effect in the modern version. Kevin made several accounts and changed them depending on his mood. One nick was used for normal communication. He used the second one when he felt the urge to be particularly frank. On thirds, when he wanted to talk about death and gothic. He was careful not to mix up his accounts, and he was heartily spared by the way the tone of his interlocutors changed depending on what role he was playing today. These little hoaxes kept the guy entertained. Kevin appeared in constant interlocutors, communication with whom gradually and unobtrusively moved to the real. And a little later, the main joint of the chat room decided to organize a meeting of all users, so Kevin got a whole company of buddies at once. It turned out that the site recorded mostly young men and girls about his age, students, yesterday's school children, university graduates. They quickly found a bunch of common topics and interests. They organized activities together, from going to the movies to trips to the mountains. They helped each other with their studies and work. In general, they socialized quite closely. Kevin was grateful to Robert for pointing him to this site. The new campaign to lighten Kevin's depression had quieted down a bit. It was like a lurking thing. It seemed to him that he had quite coped with his condition and his longing for his father, and things would only get better from here on out. One thing bothered the guy. The sum for the operation did not want to accumulate. There were always some unforeseen expenses that forced him to get into his savings and take out a part of it. The car needed urgent repairs. The refrigerator broke down, and he had to buy a new one. Then his mother got sick and needed to buy her medicine. Kevin diligently continued to replenish his piggy bank, but the rate of savings did not please him. However, he reasoned, there was nowhere to hurry. Doctors said that you can operate up to 40 years old, and the girl, for whose sake it is worth going under the knife, he still has not met. So the guy just continued to work in his chosen direction. From the university, he was listed at his own request, and I said triumphantly, said Evelyn, having learned about it. Well, if you so choose, sighed her mother upon receiving the news. After all, you can recover if you think you can. Kevin suspected that he would not change his mind. After working at the company for a little over a year, he was surprised to see that a college education was not necessary at all to make good money. And it was not even necessary to hold managerial positions. More important was knowledge, the ability to quickly navigate a situation, to work with people and be responsible for everything you do. Diplomas were secondary. Having realized this, Kevin finally stopped worrying about the fact that he left the university. It seemed to him that there was nothing to worry about anymore. Everything was going according to plan, as he had planned, and everything would be all right in the end. At that time, Kevin did not know to what extent he was wrong. The chat room user meetings became a regular occurrence. They met once a week on Saturdays in a small bar with billiards and music. The composition of the participants was different each time. Someone could not free a day off to go to the bar. Some, on the contrary, were at the meetings every week. New participants came, old ones dropped out. It was not uncommon for private members to bring some of their boyfriends' friends, girlfriends, wives and husbands, young relatives. Kevin took a cup with him to the meetings several times. His sister's personal life still wasn't working out, and the guy thought that some of the guys in the chat room might be quite suitable for her as beau. Evelyn was not impressed by the guys, but found at the meeting several clients for massages, as well as a couple of girlfriends, with whom she then actively sat in clubs and parties. So Kevin decided that the trip had not been in vain. One day someone brought Wendy to the bar. She said she'd come with a friend. She had recently registered on the site and was shy to go to a general meeting with a crowd of strangers, alone. The friend ended up spending about half an hour at the bar and left, while Wendy stayed. She introduced herself to everyone as Wendy, but calling her anything other than Wendy was impossible. A short pooch with funny round glasses, perky curls sticking out of her hair in different directions. She gave the impression not of a grown-up girl, but of a mischievous little girl. Kevin wanted to take care of her, put her on his lap, feed her semolina, wrap her in a blanket, and tell her stories until she fell asleep. The touching and funny girl turned out to be, however, not a bad conversationalist. She was in her third year of pedagogical school. She was going to teach algebra and geometry. She was terribly worried that her students wouldn't take her seriously. She was into fantasy and folk rock. She wrote humorous fanzines based on her favorite works, sometimes went to festivals with the role-playing crowd. She herself wore Candlestick was not, but made various costumes, jewelry and paraphernalia for the games. In short, acted as costumers. Over conversations about all this, Kevin did not notice how the evening flew by. "You have a very interesting company," said Wendy, saying goodbye. "I'd love to hang out again. Do you get together here every week?" "Yes, every Saturday," Kevin nodded. "But we can chat on the internet on weekdays too. Let me text you the chat room address." That you waved your hand, Wendy. "What internet? I don't even have a computer. I was going to buy one for school and for work. But it turned out to be so complicated. So many different features, you have to understand them. And I don't understand a thing." "Let me help you," Kevin suggested. "I work in this field. Will you tell me how you're going to use the computer? What do you need it for? And I'll find a configuration for you." They exchanged phone numbers and agreed to call each other during the week. And already on Monday, Kevin was surprised to realize that he was waiting for a call from a new acquaintance. Wendy didn't call until Wednesday. But then they called each other several times a day for the rest of the week. On Friday, the girl came to Kevin's warehouse to pick up the computer he had picked up for her. "How are you going to hang all this up?" asked without writing a bill of lading for the removal. "I'll call a cab," shrugged the girl. "Will you help me carry the boxes to the gatehouse?" "You're in a hurry. If you come for a couple of hours, I'll drive you myself." Unexpectedly for himself, the guy offered. "Work. I'll finish and deliver everything in the best way. We'll hook it up right away. Come on." Wendy was happy. "And now, not to wait in vain, I'll run for sandwiches." "Okay, I saw a cute little cafe on the way over. They sell takeout. I just want to eat. I want a nightmare." "How do you want what?" Before the end of the working day, Kevin managed to finish all the business and have tea with Wendy, with the sandwiches she brought. Then they loaded the freshly bought computer into the car and went to the girl's house. Wendy lived alone in a small studio apartment. Such a layup was new to Kevin. He looked around with interest at the dwelling of a new acquaintance. "To be honest, I do not really like that there is no wall between the kitchen and the room," the girl admitted. But it was the cheapest option possible. Such apartments are just beginning to be built. Buyers are not used to them yet, so they sell them cheaper than others. My parents and I decided that it would do for the first time. And then we'll see how life turns out. In principle, even convenient, Kevin grinned, connecting the cables to the system unit. The refrigerator counts. You don't have to go far near the computer. When I lived with my sister, I had a computer in the kitchen. Only there was room. I like it very much. When I moved it into my room, I missed having a refrigerator within walking distance. Wendy laughed. She was fiddling with the stove, and when Kevin finished setting it up, she called him over for dinner. She was a great cook and a great girl. Kevin was even surprised that she cooked such serious dishes as minced meat and peppers, complex side dishes, and puffed salad for herself. He himself was too lazy to cook porridge and made do with half-finished meals, cutlets or sausages with some uncomplicated side dish like pasta or buckwheat. You can't lose the skill. Really? Wendy explained to him when he expressed his surprise. And if you floss for a few months, you'll forget all the recipes. I try not to let that happen. You're a hero, Kevin said with feeling. I'm not capable of that. It's nice and cozy. The food is good. I don't even want to leave. So just stay, Wendy said and put her hand on his arm. The girl's intentions and expectations were clear in her gaze. Kevin stirred. He liked the girl very much. He was attracted to her, but he suddenly imagined what would happen if he stayed the night. He would get into bed with her, respond to her caresses, and after a while he would run away shamefully under the shouts of awe. So you don't want me. You lied. You think I'm a homeland. He shuddered. Wendy's in a private party now, thought he suddenly told some of the girls there. Word will get out. Yeah, they'll think it's inferior to make fun of him. That's just what was missing. Wendy sensed the change in his mood and asked warily, "Something's wrong." "I thought you liked me," Kevin nodded. "It's just that, Wendy, I like you a lot," the boy said, deciding to be frank. "I'd like to do more than just stay one night. I'd like you to be my girlfriend." Wendy's eyes flashed joyfully with embarrassment. A smile appeared on her face. "Oh, really, Kevin?" "Yes, waitly," he pronounced. "But you see, here's the thing. I can't have a serious relationship right now. I'm having some health problems, and my whole focus is on them right now. I need to finish my treatment, and then I'll be ready to think about having affairs with girls, that is, with you. And it's a little awkward for me to offer myself to a girl who's a sick inferior." He shrugged his shoulders with an embarrassed grin. "Something venereal. Anxious?" asked Wendy. "No, not at all," Kevin laughed. "From that point of view, I'm perfectly healthy. I can submit any certificates. If you want, it's different. I won't detail it. I'm really embarrassed. A young guy with sores. But I promise you, in 2 or 3 months it'll be over. And then, if you're still interested, of course, I will be," Wendy said firmly and nodded as if to confirm her words. "I'll wait. In the meantime, we'll just hang out as good friends." "Of course," Kevin laughed lightly, stood up and hugged the girl. "But I'm going now." "Okay." He drove home and pondered what to do next. He didn't have enough money for the operation yet. He needed about 2 times his salary. He could try to borrow from one of his buddies, even from Robert. He'd mentioned more than once that he was saving most of his paycheck without knowing what for, or take out a loan. He's got the seniority now, or even ask for a loan at work, and that he's in good standing. The director should go along with it. If you get the money in the next couple of days, you can start preparing for the operation next week. All the tests can be done in a couple weeks, plus weeks of hospitalization, maybe even less. Then a month for recovery, just the 2 months he'd promised Wendy. Kevin feared the girl wouldn't wait any longer. Of course, she assured him otherwise, but who knows about young girls? She was only 20. For her, perhaps 2 months seems like a prohibitively long time. Meanwhile, he didn't want to lose the girl. Kevin spent the whole weekend researching the websites of various banks. The interest rates on consumer loans seemed ridiculous. He would have accepted them, but the banks thought the amount he needed was too small. The minimum loan amount almost everywhere started at $1,000, and none of the banks provided for early repayment. He would have to pay a nightmare amount of money, Kevin thought. But in principle, it was worth the risk. Robert had been unavailable all weekend. He didn't see his buddy until Monday when he came to the office. The guy ran to the warehouse himself. He plopped down on the chair with a bang and made a solemn declaration. "Yes, it's a draw. I'm getting married." His face shone with that stupid smile that one sees only in young men who are in love with each other. "That's news," Kevin marveled. "Give me the details. I don't think you mentioned anything like this on Friday." "I met this girl," Robert exclaimed. "She's beautiful, she's smart, she's a fire in the sack. You can't pass that up. I just met her and got married right away." Kevin grinned skeptically. "No, we've been dating for a couple months." Robert was a little embarrassed. "I was just afraid to say anything so I wouldn't jinx it, you know. We went to meet her parents on Saturday. They live in the suburbs. They have a house. And I asked her to marry me. And she said yes. I'm moving in with them this week. I'll have to buy a car so I can get to work properly. There's transportation, but you know, it's a long commute. I'm in the middle of it. Your stash will be enough for a car and a wedding." Kevin smiled. He was happy for his buddy. "Well, as long as it's for the car." Robert was a little confused. "But I'll make enough for the wedding." "What's that?" "We haven't discussed the details yet, but I think I can handle it." "At least show me the bride," Kevin said good-naturedly. "I can't jinx it now. There's nothing to be afraid of." "And easily agreed, buddy. We're going to a new coffee shop downtown tomorrow. They just opened it. Interesting to squeeze in. Come with us after work just in time." "I see," nodded Kevin. "Go to work, fiancé. You're probably breaking up in your email." Robert went to his office, and Kevin, though happy for his friend, felt a little disappointed. He couldn't borrow money from him now. He needed the car, the wedding more than he needed the money. He'd have to bow to the principal, and the principal was surprisingly okay with it, even when Kevin said that he needed the loan for medical treatment, and once he got it, he would go on sick leave for a while. The supervisor didn't object. He promised to prepare the documents and told him to come for the money tomorrow. And added lastly, by the way, we have not been on vacation once in a year and a half. That's just how we'll get you a vacation. During this time, you will solve your health issues, and you won't need the vacation money. I don't know if there's any unforeseen expenses." Yeah, they were a little shocked. Turns out it was all so simple. Encouraged, he called Wendy and invited her to go to the coffee shop with him tomorrow. The girl happily agreed. It was agreed that he would pick her up after the lecture and take her to dinner. The hall of the coffee house was almost full, but Robert somehow managed to find a free table. When Kevin and Wendy entered the room, he was already waiting for them. He jumped up from his chair. The guy waved at them, and the guys started to make their way over to their buddy. "Are you with the lady?" Robert exclaimed. "Why didn't you tell me? I wouldn't have worried that you'd be bored with us." "What's your name?" "Lady," Wendy said sternly. "Nice to meet you." "The lovely Wendy. And here's my fiancé. Please love and applaud." Large, tall, he blocked with him the chair that stood by the table. Robert now took a step back and pointed haughtily at the girl sitting behind him. Kevin turned around, and the words froze in his throat. Sitting by the table, smiling sweetly, was Jenna. They didn't advertise their acquaintance, but at the end of the evening they got a few minutes to talk privately. "Coincidences happen," Jenna said thoughtfully. "They do," Kevin nodded. "Are you and Robert serious?" Jenna raised an eyebrow and looked at the guy with an uncertain expression. "Why do I ask? Did the other guy rush into it? If yes, then you and I will have to communicate from time to time. We're good friends, and if I start avoiding you, will it cause bewilderment or something?" "No problem," nodded Jenna. "After all, what did you and I have? A failed affair. It's been a few years. Who could care about that? We won't be best friends, of course," the girl grinned. "But we won't need to be. Right?" "Right," Kevin sighed in relief, although the words about a failed romance had hurt him a little. He figured that the easier Jenna made it to relate to their past, the better. "Who's the girl with you?" Jenna suddenly inquired. "A coworker too? Or did you just bring her along to complete the package?" "That's my girlfriend," Kevin said seriously. Denise made a perplexed grimace, But then Robert and Wendy returned to the table, and the conversation had to be curtailed. Kevin drove Wendy home. They talked and kissed for a long time in the car, and parted only at midnight. He was on his way home, happy and elated. The previous evening the boss had given him a loan, and Kevin even had time to call the clinic where he planned to have the surgery and make an appointment. His vacation was to start in a day and stretch for almost a month, just enough time for the hospitalization, to prepare for it, and to rest. Kevin could hardly believe that just a little bit more, and he would become a full-fledged man. Gone would be all the complexes that had plagued him for the last few years. Gone would be all the awkwardness with girls. A happy life will finally begin. Especially the girl for this happy life he seems to have already found. Kevin parked in his driveway, thinking happy thoughts in his head. As soon as he stepped inside, he was accosted by a first-floor neighbor from the apartment below him. Kevin lived on the third. There he appeared, finally over the property neighbor from the doorstep. "Where the hell have you been, Kevin? Half of the entrance is waiting for you without water." Kevin froze on the landing, and the neighbor has already dragged him into her apartment. "Look how you flooded me," she said indignantly. "The whole ceiling in the bathroom fell down." "What the hell is that? David, did you kill the whole renovation?" Soon the situation became clear. In the morning, there was no hot water in the house. Kevin turned the faucet and washed his face with ice water. And as it turned out, he forgot to screw the hot valve on the savior, and in addition, and threw a rag into the sink, which wiped his shoes before going out. The water was given in the middle of the afternoon. The sink was an old model without overflow rag, plugged the only drain, and the water, filling the bowl, flowed to the neighbors below. Those, of course, were at work and discovered the flood only after 19 o'clock, having returned home. 12 o'clock boiling water flowed down the walls through the ceiling. The neighbor from the first floor washed out the plaster, sprinkled bathtub, damaging the enamel. The neighbor on the second floor was hit harder. He burned out the wiring under the ceiling made of plastic panels. The lights and all the outlets in the bathroom were in disrepair. Worse, water came over the threshold and flooded the hallway, where the Honorable David had recently renovated. New wallpaper was bubbling off the walls. The laminate flooring had driven behind the wave and completely in disrepair. Kevin's own apartment had suffered as well. But this worried the guy least of all. His own place could be put in order gradually, and with neighbors it was necessary to solve something at once. He spent the next day at work as if on pins and needles. Even a call from Wendy didn't improve his mood. In the evening, Kevin met with the neighbors. They calculated their losses and the future costs of putting the apartments in order and provided estimates. Kevin argued with some of them, but agreed with most of them. The troublesome Vanessa from the first floor and the arrogant David from the second floor. Despite their complicated characters, they were men of integrity, and they didn't try to rip off the hapless guy. Kevin took the money to the neighbors, gave each of them money in accordance with their advice, accepted the receipts, which David insisted on, and said that the settlement was made. No complaints, and closed the door behind the visitors, and for a long time looked with empty eyes at the box, in which half an hour ago lay his savings, lay the hard-won sum for the operation, his ticket to a normal life. Now there was a lonely $10 left at the bottom of the box. Everything had to start all over again. Evelyn was finishing massaging a client when she heard the short trill of the phone. A text message. The girl thought. Hardly anything urgent. She finished her work, cleaned herself up, got her paycheck and went home. The client lived in the same yard as Evelyn, so she fearlessly agreed to late visits to her. And now, when the masseuse came out of the entrance, it was about midnight. Evelyn sat down on a bench near her house for a smoke and a break. Remembering the trill of the phone, she pulled the machine out of her pocket and opened a new message, and choked on the cigarette smoke. "Evelyn," she read on the screen. "If you got this message, it means I'm no longer alive. I can't do this anymore." And the text was Kevin, and it took Evelyn a lot of concentration and rereading it several times to realize what it was about. She dialed her brother's number, but the phone responded with the standard unavailable caller message. She dialed again and again, going up to her apartment, looking for her purse, quickly changing into her sneakers. Knocking on the door of a neighbor she was buddies with who had a car. It seemed to Evelyn that the damsel, time after time bringing the caller, temporarily unavailable, already sympathized with her, but could do nothing. She didn't get through to her neighbor and ran into the yard, hoping to find some random cab or hitchhiker on the street. Evelyn almost ran into her brother's car on the sidewalk. "Is this some kind of joke?" she shouted, almost out of control. The girl tore open the driver's door of the car and saw that Kevin was sitting in the passenger compartment with his head down on the steering wheel. Evelyn grabbed her brother by the shoulders and turned him around and sent him away in horror when she saw the look on his face. Evelyn muttered to Evelyn, "I'm sorry I couldn't." The plan was simple: drive out of town, get to the abandoned warehouses a few kilometers outside of town, accelerate properly, and drive full speed into the concrete wall of one of the structures. The walls there were solid, thick. Kevin remembered that from the times he'd wandered through those warehouses while playing watch. He wrote the message about his sister when he arrived at the site and set the delayed dispatch for 2 o'clock. He reasoned that should be enough time for him to accomplish what he had planned. And even if by some miracle he survived the collision with the wall at 200 hours, the internal bleeding and fractures would put his body in the right state. No medic would be able to get him out. The plan was simple. Only the boy's body didn't agree with its owner's plan. His consciousness was trying hard to end this drudgery called life, but his reflexes were stronger. When Kevin accelerated for the first time, his hands, as if automatically, twisted the wheel to the right a few meters away from the warehouse wall. The guy made several more attempts, but the result was the same every time. He swerved before he reached the saving wall. His body was not going to die, and tried with all its might to preserve his life. "Yeah, I wish I'd brought alcohol with me. I'd have had, say, a bottle of vodka. It would have dulled my reactions, and it would have been easier to crash." But he dismissed the idea of going to get alcohol. Hell knows what could happen on the way. Wouldn't he chicken out, finding himself again among people, not staying or lying drunk outside the store, unable to find the strength to get back to the place? He decided to trick his reflexes, and the last run he undertook, blindfolded his eyes with a handkerchief, found everything in the glove compartment of the car. But it seems that his brain during the previous attempts had already managed to memorize the distance at which to turn. He was only a few meters wrong. His hands twisted the steering wheel again. The car slammed the door on the corner of the building and stopped on a bump. Kevin opened the door by feel and tumbled out of the driver's seat onto the ground. The car stood a little away from the warehouse where the asphalt ended and the former lawn began. The bandage pulled back from his face. He rolled around on the ground for a long time, pounding his hands on the grass and howling. Then he got back behind the wheel and, as if on automatic, drove to his sister's house. He couldn't remember the road, so he parked in the driveway. Kevin just sat in the car, staring at one point in front of him. His mind was spinning with thoughts piling up on top of each other. Wimp, you couldn't even die. You can't do anything. You're not a man. You're a wretch, neither to get a girl, nor to save money, nor to lay hands on yourself. You shouldn't have been born in the first place. Shame on you. And he put his head down and woke up only when he heard his grandmother's cries and felt her fingers clawing at his shoulder. Evelyn almost dragged her brother to the apartment, threw him on the couch from behind the metal across the room, and she sobbed, then shouted some curses, then grabbed Corvalol and Valocordine from behind her. In the end, the girl collapsed on the sofa next to her brother, wrapped her arms around him, and burst into tears. Kevipa sat motionless until the sobs subsided. Then he began to speak in a mechanical, emotional, alien voice. He told everything about Jenna, and about her scandals, and about his sense of inferiority, and about his fear of having relationships with girls, and about his experiments, and about his trips to urology, about his examinations, about his attempts to earn money for surgeries that failed endlessly and tormented him completely, and about Wendy and the loan at work and the flood. Evelyn listened, and when the story was over, she said brokenly, "But you're a dummy, a juvenile dummy." "No, I know it was embarrassing to say. But we are not strangers, Kevipia." So many years of silence, tormented. "But wouldn't I have helped you?" But Kevin didn't hear it all anymore. Having finished talking, he passed out right there on his sister's couch. He woke up the next morning, and at first he was surprised that he was lying in the apartment, fully dressed, covered with a blanket. His head was as dizzy as a hangover, and his body was developing some kind of incomprehensible weakness. Bit by bit, he remembered last night, and to the weakness was added a burning shame. He could not imagine how to talk to his sister now, and in general, how to live on. Kevin listened. The apartment was quiet. Evelyn must have raced off on her own. He had to pull himself together and leave quietly. They'd have a talk to explain, but then they'd do it later. If only Evelyn had the sense not to tell her mother, he thought. Kevin tried to get up, but realized that his body was barely obeying him. His head was spinning. He struggled to sit up on the couch, and after spending less than a minute in a relatively upright position, collapsed back onto the cushion. Getting behind the wheel in this condition was out of the question. "I'll call a cab," the boy thought. He reached for the phone. But then the front door slammed loudly and footsteps sounded in the hallway. Evelyn was back. Kevin squeezed his eyes shut. Let her think he was still asleep. Maybe he'd gone out again. But Evelyn walked over to the couch, crouched on the edge, and put her palm on her brother. The palm felt nice. "Chilly doesn't pretend," quietly said the sister. "I can see you're awake." "It's okay, Kevin. We'll get through this." The boy opened his eyes carefully. Evelyn looked at him with careful sympathy. She was slightly alarmed, but not angry. "I was afraid you'd run without me too." She smiled softly. "That was the thought," Kevin agreed. "That was the thought," Kevin agreed. "Where were you running to?" "Early in the morning. I went to the bank," Evelyn explained. She reached into her purse, which was lying on her lap. "Here's one for you." She took out a wad of money and put it on the pillow in front of Kevin. "I consulted here a little while you were asleep," she explained. "It should be enough for everything, tests, surgery, and even a paid room, if you need it. I was saving up for a car, but then I thought, I don't even have a license. Not yet. And the money's lying around. You need it more." Evelyn. "I, Kevin, am totally embarrassed." "I don't know. I'm embarrassed, and you're embarrassed in general." Evelyn was indignant. "It's embarrassing for me to know that you're tormented and have cockroaches in your head. It's okay for me to walk around wondering when you're going to get hurt next time. No, brother, take the money and go to the doctors. If you're confused about anything, first of all, know that it's not all there is. I still have my savings. And second of all, keep in mind, I'm not here to help you so much. I'm not so much helping you as I am helping my own peace of mind by buying from you. You get the surgery, you start dating your Elena. You marry her. And then I don't have to worry about you." I breathed a sigh of relief. Kevin suddenly laughed. He propped himself up on an elbow, put his arm around Evelyn, and pulled her down onto the couch behind him. She was still dizzy. "Evelyn, you're the best sister in the world." "Feeling," he pronounced. "Thank you. And I'm sorry, I really was an idiot. I'll give you the money. I promise I'll earn it and give it to you. In the meantime, I'll be your personal driver. Do you want?" The operation was a success, and the recovery period was no trouble either. It proceeded in full accordance with the predictions of doctors. Still, Kevin was a little worried, going to the last checkup. But the doctor, having made the necessary arrangements, said solemnly, "Well, congratulations to you, young man. You can lead a normal, full-fledged sex life, but I only beg you not to throw you into all sorts of trouble. We have good wine at our clinic, of course, but it would be better to stay away from them." Kevin laughed and fervently assured from Kulikov that he was not going to indulge in debauchery. Before the first night with Wendy, Kevin was, of course, quite nervous. The assurances of the doctor is one thing, but what if in practice something goes wrong? However, feeling that his body obeyed him and behaved according to the situation, he quickly relaxed, and when Wendy pressed her whole body against him and whispered in his ear, yes, it was worth the wait of a couple months. For the first time in years, he felt completely happy. The relationship theirs was progressing like the best of dreams. The girl was easygoing and fun. She was interesting to talk to. It was easy to organize ventures and little adventures like sudden trips out of town and night rolls around the city. Rosy friends with her were wonderful to spend time with in bed and nice just to be around. Kevin had even almost abandoned the chat room because Wendy was completely enough for him to override his need for trusting companionship. He introduced the girl to his sister and was happy to see them becoming friends. Wendy and Evelyn spent hours on the phone, discussing some of their feminine secrets. From time to time, they went shopping or to clubs, or had coffee shop get-togethers. Camille, Kevin also introduced his favorite, and she approved of it. They visited their mother at least a couple times a month. One day on one of their visits, Camille sat her son down beside her and sternly asked, "How long are you going to fool the girls? Are you thinking of getting married or not?" "I think you should," Kevin smiled. "We talked about it, but we decided to wait until Wendy finished her studies. When she gets her diploma, we'll get married then." "All right," Camille nodded. "Are you going to get your degree? Or my wife will be educated, and you'll be uneducated." The woman grinned good-naturedly. "Mom, I don't need a diploma yet. I need to work to save up for my wedding, and then my wife will be young. You have to feed her every day." Kevin laughed. "Oh, it's up to you, of course." His mother shook her head, and after a moment's silence, she added a little, "She's a good one, Wendy. I wish I'd lived to see her. Would he have liked her?" "Yes," Kevin said after a pause. "I think my father would have liked her too." And he put his arms around his mother and pulled her to him, kissed her on the top of her head. He thought that for the first time in years, he didn't feel bitter about his father. Kevin's jokes about his work were not in vain. The company he worked for was gradually expanding. Turnover was growing, and the client base was developing. Accordingly, the staff was growing. Kevin himself had recently become a warehouse manager. He was assisted by 2 storekeepers and 2 loaders who worked in shifts. The sales department has grown. The chief hired 3 new managers, who were now supervised by Robert. The guy was terribly proud of his new position and bragged about it to his future wife. He and Dimka continued to live together and planned a wedding for the end of the summer. Kevin and Wendy occasionally visited them, but the guy noticed that Wendy did not like Jenna and tried to minimize such visits. He would bring Robert to his house or meet him on neutral territories, in bars, cafes, at some events like concerts or mundane parties. Kevin didn't really understand why he was acting this way, but he felt better. Right. However, in the middle of the summer, a friend persistently called Kevin to his place. He needed help with the repair of the car, and he timed it to coincide with the weekend. He decided that after the repair work it would be possible to go to the river, to grill kebabs, and in general to enjoy all the delights of summer vacation in the village house. Kevin agreed, but Wendy suddenly opposed the idea. The guy explained as best he could that he had already promised and that it was awkward for him to let his buddies down. But the girl deflated. All through Friday night. By Saturday, they still hadn't made up, and Kevin left for Robert's with a heavy heart. He decided that he would try to finish the repairs as soon as possible, so that by evening he could go back and make up with his beloved. "Yeah, I don't know," Wendy said sadly into the phone. "Maybe I behaved wrongly." "I don't think so, no offense taken. But it's Jenna who's so mean. I can't even explain why, but I don't want them to communicate." Evelyn sighed. She knew why Jenna was nasty, but she wasn't going to tell the girl about it. She would have to reveal her secrets herself, but she was tired of hearing Wendy whine too. "Wendy, it's okay," she said soothingly. "I'm sure Kevin will come over and you two will make up." "Wait, he's calling me. I'll call you right back." Evelyn dropped the call with Wendy and took the call from her brother. But after talking for a couple minutes, she did not call the girl back. She simply forgot about her. Throwing Petrovka on a house dress and grabbing her purse, Evelyn rashly rushed out of the apartment. Her way lay to the intensive care unit of one of the city hospitals. She was in a hurry, persuading the cab driver to go as fast as possible, but she was too late. When the girl rushed into the ward, Kevin had already died. The whole thing was stupid and ridiculous. It was a hot summer day. Guys fiddling in the garage in the process of repairing the car drained the brake fluid from the system in the first bottle. It turned out to be plastic, greenish 2-liter from under the spike. After a while, already finishing the work, Kevin, thirsty and without looking, grabbed the first bottle. He managed to take 2 big gulps of brake fluid before he realized that something was wrong. Robert immediately clamored to call an ambulance and have them pump his stomach, but Kevin took his concern and the whole situation rather lightly. He went into the bushes, stuck 2 fingers in his mouth, and said that the gastric lavage was finished. From the entreaties to go to the doctors, Kevin only waved away. Future father-in-law Robert, having learned about what had happened, after half an hour offered the guy to drink a glass of vodka. They say, from the toxins contained in the brake fluid. Ethyl alcohol is an antidote. This, by the way, confirmed later by the doctors who came for the guy. Except that the vodka should have been drunk immediately, and after it all the same to wash out the stomach. But the guys did not take this into account. They finished the repairs and started to gather for shashliks on the riverbank. Kevin, citing fatigue, lay down to rest on a chaise lounge in the shade and dozed off. Robert decided not to wake him. He instructed his mother to explain to the guest where they would rest when he woke up. The company went to the shore, and when they returned in the evening, they found the guy on the same chaise lounge. Friends began to push Kevin jokingly. "Here, they say what Sonia overslept. All tasty." The guy opened his eyes, tried to get up, and rising to his feet, collapsed to the ground. He lost consciousness. Here, of course, called an ambulance, but it was too late. From the brake fluid had already spread throughout the body. It had affected all the organs of consciousness. Kevin never came back, and despite the doctor's best efforts, he died the next morning. How could it be, Evelyn? How could it be? Camille stood by the cemetery bed. Until a few years ago, this section of the cemetery had been empty, but now it was almost entirely occupied by her family and her parents and her husband. And now her son. Things had just started to get better, she said brokenly, and there had been a promotion at work, and her salary had gone up. And Wendy, and he'd gotten over his homesickness, and that's what it was all for. To lie here now. Evelyn hugged her mother in silence. She herself was still in shock. Not since the day Robert had called her from the phone and told her what had happened. Not talking to doctors, not funeral troubles, not caring for her mother, could not rouse the girl, and she became as if slowed down, walked slowly, spoke more softly. She looked as if she were looking at something. She couldn't believe her brother was gone. All 3 women close to Kevin had experienced his death in their own way. If Evelyn was in a stupor, Wendy was literally hysterical for days on end. She sobbed nonstop. That subsides a little, then again wanted to sob in the anim. Evelyn asked the girl to go with her to her brother's apartment to pick up clothes for the funeral. But there was little use for Wendy. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the girl would immediately drop to her knees and sob in her voice. Evelyn cost a great effort not to consider her for it. Everyone was unhappy after all. She thought, everyone is bitter and hurting. But there are things to do that no one else will do but us. It takes focus and concentration to see them through. Can't stay out of the way and then. Evelyn was greatly relieved when the company of private citizens who had come to Kevin's funeral took the girl in and drove her back to town the day after the funeral. Camille had fallen into a kind of lingering bewilderment. She hardly cried at all. She behaved as usual. But every minute, every second, she tried to understand what had happened to her son. Why was it so? The woman could not accept the injustice of what had happened. She had to find someone to blame. Every day she had a new theory, and every day she shared it with her daughter. I went to see Kevin at work. I told Camille. The boss was giving the funeral money. And the girl who worked with him told me that his storekeeper wanted Kevin badly enough to take Kevin's place. No other way than he poisoned him. Mom is tired, Evelyn said. God be with you. The storekeeper was not with them that day. Camille calmed down for a while, and then it started again. Maybe that storekeeper Robert put Kevin up to poisoning them. Gave him money. For instance, she'd speculate. Well, he'd drop out and Mom would sigh. Evelyn sighed. Robert, Kevin was a longtime friend. He wouldn't do that for money. Besides, it's not the kind of time to be harassed for a promotion. It's not a presidential position either. It'd be something to take the heat for. Camille nodded, but a day later, she was back at it. Didn't the girl who came with Robert to the funeral? I recognize her, she'd say. That's Jenna. Kevin used to bring her here once. I think they were dating. Maybe Robert found out and got jealous, so he slipped her a bottle of poison. Mom, that was years ago. Evelyn struggled to act calm. Everyone had long since forgotten about it. Kevin, Wendy had it. Robert, this Jenna was about to get married. But what jealousy? Wendy, Evelyn. What if it was Kevin himself? Suddenly, Camille said. Wendy said they had a fight before this trip. Suddenly, he was so upset he decided to poison himself. Evelyn's mom raised her voice. Don't talk nonsense. They didn't have a fight, just a little spat. He wouldn't have poisoned himself over it. But Camille wouldn't calm down. She wanted to find out why her son had died. Having questioned everyone who was with him at Roberts, having talked to all colleagues and acquaintances, the woman decided to resort to the help of psychics. Her neighbor Emily told her that in the neighboring village, there is a girl who can communicate with the spirits of the dead. And Camille is going to visit her. Evelyn, tired of arguing, went with her mother. She was skeptical of Camille's ideas, but the idea that Danko might have been poisoned kept her on her toes. She knew, unlike her mother, that the boy had tried to commit suicide once before. Of course, the situation was completely different then, and Kevin's condition was different. But who knows? He was very fond of his Wendy, and maybe their little spat had really hit him hard. Or maybe there was something else in his life that Evelyn had missed. Had she failed to notice and lend a shoulder in time, leading to a tragic outcome? Doubts gnawed at the girl, so she, young materialist, agreed to go with her mother to visit the young media mind. The psychic girl's appearance didn't inspire confidence. An ordinary girl of about 6 years old in a short cathedral skirt, wearing a pink t-shirt with a teddy bear and stompy sandals. Blonde hair tied up in 2 short axe bridges appeared on the sides of her face, cheeks, and plastered with watermelon. It's a crumb of a medium. Don't be ridiculous. However, the girl, seeing the guests, got out from behind the table, took Camille by the hand and led her into the room, nodding to the giver, followed by seating the guests. The girl went out and came back in a couple minutes already clean. Auntie, hello, Aunt Evelyn. Hello. Camille said it politely. How do you know our names? Camille was surprised. No, he said, shrugged her shoulders. He said you were coming. What else did he say? The woman wondered. He said it was nobody's fault. It's just the way things are, said the girl. He told you to say he didn't mean it. He didn't. To tell you not to worry. It happens. Things don't work out right. And he also said that Uncle gets upset because you worry makes him uncomfortable and hurts. Camille nodded. Then she cried, and Evelyn, rummaging in her purse, took out a handkerchief and handed it to her mother. The girl medium slipped out of the room and returned with a glass of water. Drink it, Camille, she said sternly. And stop crying. You can't drown them with your tears. The woman obediently drank the water, sighed a little, pulled herself together, and thanking the young seer moved to leave. Evelyn followed her. They were already on their way to the wicket. When the little girl looked out of the door, she shouted, "Aunt Evelyn, did you forget your handkerchief?" Evelyn turned and hurried back to the house. When she reached the porch, the girl dragged her into the hay, wrapped her arms around her, pulled, forcing her to squat, and whispered quickly in her ear, "Her not telling you. Telling her to talk. Kevin didn't tell her to. He didn't want it to happen this way. He didn't himself. It was the girl who wanted it, not his girl. Another girl. It used to be his. Don't tell her. Kevin didn't say to. She'll be worried. Kevin doesn't want to hurt this girl. Let her live as she wants." He said. "What else did he say?" asked Evelyn, and stunned by this fast speech. "He said that he loves you, that you are the best sister in the world." Already slower and calmer spoke the girl. "And he said thank you for not telling your mother about how he rode in the car. You don't tell me about the girl, and you don't tell me about the girl. Let her live as she pleases." Evelyn promised to take the handkerchief and went out. Camille had calmed down considerably after her visit to the young soothsayer. She stopped looking for someone to blame, thinking up different versions of what had happened. She cried the evening after the trip. She seems to have found the strength to accept death. Her son was often sad. Talked to Kevin, sitting down next to his picture. Talked to her husband too, but she didn't turn on her daughter or herself. She seemed to believe that this was the way things were and to accept it. Evelyn, on the other hand, had fallen into anxiety when she returned from the village to her apartment. She had been pondering the girl's words to the psychic for days on end. The girl wanted not his girl, another girl. Used to be his, it sounded in her head. Under that description, out of those who had been there that fateful day with Kevin, perfectly fit Jenna. But that's crazy, Evelyn thought. Why would she do that? She really has another life, another fiancé. It's been years. What's the big deal? But the girl who didn't know who was next to Kevina or what their relationship was. For some reason, she said that. That phrase can't be explained by a random hit, like the common one. He said he loved you. Maybe she did somehow manage to communicate with Kevin. All the more reason for her insistence on not saying anything to her mother and for not taking revenge on this mysterious girl. She's quite the spirit. Only my little brother would say that. Thought. Evelyn hesitated for a while longer. She called Robert and asked him to arrange for her to meet Jenna. Robert was clearly unhappy with Evelyn's request. He spoke into the phone. "I understand, but you have to understand, it's not our fault. Seriously, I really appreciated Kevin. He was my only real friend, and Jenna even more so. She hasn't been herself since that day. We've already been questioned by the police. Like he didn't die on his own. Maybe he was poisoned. Thank you, by the way, for not filing a report." Evelyn, stop making Dimka nervous. Evelyn vowed that this was the last time. The guy sighed and appointed her a meeting at their house. Jenna has been self-conscious about her boyish figure all her life. At 14, most of her classmates could already boast a seductive, rounded figure. And by 16, many of them began to buy themselves a bra size 4. Against their background, skinny Jenna with small breasts and narrow hips looked a little poor. Added sadness and the fact that boys at 16 were more interested in round girls and were not able to appreciate the elegance of the figure. Girls used to tease their girlfriend. "Good for you, uncle," said one of them, "can safely walk the streets at discos as you want to dance. Not that any man would bother you, he wouldn't even turn around." "Yeah, I've been picking up on that. You don't even have to worry about getting raped. No normal man could get a hard-on for a figure like that." Jenna laughed with them, but at home she cried into her pillow. After entering the university and getting a relative freedom from parental control, the girl began to experiment. By the end of the first year, she managed to get into bed with 3 fellow students, but these victories did not please Dimka. Guys were modest nerds, and to seduce them did not have to spend a lot of effort. They could hardly be considered normal men. That all changed when Kevin showed up. Tall, handsome, intelligent but not nerdy. He was more attractive than all those boring locks. Besides, he had a serious crush on Jenna. He admired her. He sought to spend as much time with her as possible. He admired her face and her figure. In his eyes, Jenna saw herself as a beauty. And in addition to that, she herself fell in love with Kevin for the first time for real. All the more intense was the blow she received when they were in bed for the first time. All the old complexes suddenly came to life and came at her with a new force. She felt as if she had been mocked, made to believe in her own attractiveness, and then pushed her nose into a muddy puddle. And this was the man she trusted, the man she loved. It was almost impossible to get over. But Jenna did. Over time, she had etched out her love for Kevin and had almost forgotten about him. She managed to realize that for every figure there is a connoisseur, and there are many men for whom she looks attractive. She became more confident, learned to flirt, gained admirers, and even a fiancé. But when they met again with Kevin, she realized that she could hardly hold herself together. The memory of her first youthful love and first serious disappointment, it was too strong. Even if they had just met on the street or in company, it would have taken her a long time to recover from that chance encounter. And here the meetings had become a regular occurrence. Kevin, since their separation, had matured and gotten even more handsome. Jenna kept catching herself comparing him to Robert. And these comparisons all the time come out not in favor of her fiancé. But even this could be survived if it were not for the girl next to Kevin. Wendy is a fat, shaggy hen with stupid glasses who can neither step nor speak. Naive, overly enthusiastic, simple-minded, stupid. What does Kevin see in her? Why does he look at her with such admiration? Why is he so caring and affectionate with her? What is it that has kept him so long by her side? These questions kept the days going. Each time, watching the behavior of this couple, she became more and more perplexed. And each time, she became more and more angry and resentful toward Kevin. After a while, they grew to the point where it became impossible to carry them around. Me, he didn't want me, but he wanted that fat one. I yelled in Evelyn's face at me. He couldn't get a hard-on for that stupid cow. He told me, I love you, I love you. He was just having fun. He was just lying. And I'm sorry for him. Yeah, it took me a year to come to my senses. You can't imagine what I went through. And he's like that, like nothing happened. From that sorpus, Evelyn didn't have to ask the girl anything. It seemed Jenna was already tired of carrying her own worries about what she had done. Evelyn just sat down across from her, asking Robert to remove himself, and took a long look at the girl. Jenna chortled at first, and then started to get embarrassed under that intense stare. And when Evelyn asked softly, "Would you explain why you did it?" the girl seemed to burst into tears. I thought he was having fun with her too. Screaming, she's teasing, enticing. But I see they've been together a long time and sleeping together. They slept over, I was listening. So he wants her, and she wants me. Jenna noticed that the guys had poured brake fluid into a lemonade bottle. And the plan was born. It was hot. There was no water in the garage. The girl rushed to the nearest store and bought 2 bottles of it, solemnly brought them into the garage to everyone's approval. When both came, she put one next to Kevin, carefully saying, "Yes, I put it here for you again so that you would not get distracted, if anything." Having waited for the guy to die and memorized the location of the bottle, she stepped aside. And after a while, when Robert were fully immersed in their business, switched the lemonade for brake fluid and ran out of the garage. "I didn't mean to kill him," she said. Evelyn quietly shouted, "I thought I'd just get a little toilet poisoning for a couple days. We got Aukies across the street, so they're drinking breaks every day, and they're alive. I didn't think they were dying from it. I didn't even want to." The girl cried. "I just wanted to do him a little mean thing, ruin his weekend. If you want to get in no mood to settle down with that Wendy box, I'm shocked it turned out this way myself." She burst into tears, and when she subsided, she looked up at Evelyn with cold eyes. "Just so you know," she said, "I'm the one who told you everything. I'm not telling anyone else. If you're going to report me, you can't prove anything. I'll say that I was joking, that I made a joke, that I was nervous to calm you down, and you didn't come to us anymore, that these bottles have everyone's fingerprints on them. I'm not the only one who took them, and there's no more evidence. You got it. What if I got it all on a tape recorder now? Evelyn asked. So what? The girl shrugged. A heartfelt confession. I'm not going to write it. And these conversations can't be used as evidence. I can retract what I said at any time. And you can't do anything to me. I wasn't going to do anything to you, Evelyn said with a sigh. I mean, I'd love to snap your head off right now. Kevin didn't tell me to. He said let him live as he lives. So live your life now and remember that you killed a man for nothing. Oh, don't get all moralistic on me, the girl said. But Evelyn got up and went to the door. Robert was standing at the door. Are you finished? He asked Sukhov. Yes, thank you for letting us talk, nodded Evelyn. Evelyn, are you in no hurry? Suddenly the guy asked, can you give me a ride into town? Because my car is still in repair, and now it's already at 100. Where are you going? Jenna perked up. I don't know yet, Robert answered. But I can't live with you anymore. You were eavesdropping. The girl said it in the most indignant tone. Shame on you. Who said anything about shame? Robert sighed. It wasn't even necessary to eavesdrop. You're lucky your parents aren't here, or they'd know what you're up to. Step aside, and I'll pack a bag. Evelyn brought Robert back to her place, and with a bat until you find an apartment, she said indifferently. The armchair bed is all yours. Camille took a tray out of the oven and admired the pies lying on it. They were nice and crispy, fluffy and fragrant. Why are you? You've been like that since this morning. The voice of my neighbor Emily sounded from behind me. How are the kids coming? You guessed right, laughed the woman. Look, they've just arrived. She nodded at the window. A car pulled up under the window, and Robert jumped out and opened the door for Evelyn. Evelyn slowly made her way out of the cabin, heavy, carrying her pregnant belly. Camille splayed her hands behind her as she hurried out of the kitchen to meet her family. Subscribe and click the bell. Stephen Faber has distrusted women since he was a child. His mother was to blame. His relationship with Camille was complicated and strained. The woman was known as demanding and intransigent to other people's shortcomings. Therefore, when in his youth he dropped out of college, his mother annoyingly showed him her contempt. For a whole year afterward, she nagged him and called him unemployed. Every day he heard the same phrase, when will you get off my neck? The last course left, and he didn't make it. A weakling. Life with such a woman was not pleasant. She couldn't accept her son's independence. So she put all the household chores on the boy's shoulders. But Stephen did not like to do household chores, and often under a plausible pretext to shirk the tedious work. In addition, she flooded him with criticism. Camille hated his long hair, which was shaved at the back of his head into a ponytail. She was infuriated by the careless style in Stephen's clothes. And most annoying of all was his nightlife, gambling online or going to the city's hot spots. But they weren't the guy's true hobbies. He simply found discharge in them when his mother had urgent business and she tightened her iron grip. Stephen enjoyed sitting at home, watching television, and reading books. Camille was a successful broker out of forking out decent money. Stephen, on the other hand, was wasting it. He was not wasteful. He just wanted to do everything to spite his mother. Since childhood, she considered her son a worthless person, worthless for nothing and weak character. Not once in her life did she consult with the boy growing up. The woman only told him how to live his life. But he was completely deaf to her moralizing, just did not allow the usurper to break his protective shell. It was a silent but stubborn protest. Sure, Stephen was used to the luxuries his mother surrounded herself with, but she did it out of pure selfishness, because everything in the house was arranged to her liking, and she was used to having her orders obeyed immediately. The mansion was 15 minutes from the city. Near a small picturesque river surrounded by a coniferous forest, Stephen knew how to get aesthetic pleasure from communicating with nature, so he liked to walk around the neighborhood in the evenings. This habit was formed in his early childhood from the time when his father lived with them, and Stephen felt needed and loved. Even now, having become an adult and saying to himself the cherished word, his father his soul as if defending, becoming weak and receptive heart, warming the craving then and pleasant feeling of love and hope. Unlike Camille, his father Sam was the embodiment of the power of dignity and kindness. Many women looked up to him. You bet, such a specimen of enormous stature, majestic and muscular with a body in relief. He had lived and worked in the circus since he was a little boy. Such a monumental man dared not offend. He could not even get into a conflict situation that would make him angry. No one argued with him. This giant was a soft and kind dad. Next to him, Stephen felt protected, and he grew up with absolute fearlessness in his heart. He grew up very brave because his peers in kindergarten and at school looked up to his dad with subservience. They showed Stephen every respect and honor. His father's authority was unquestionable. It was worth people to look at him, and they immediately understood what real power is. Almost 10 years. Life with him suited Camille. Although there was no mutual understanding between the parents, they often quarreled and loudly clarified their relationship. The father did it calmly and dignified, and the mother theatrically and without. So it seemed to everyone a complete hysteric. Stephen did not understand at all what normal man could live with her mother. Her feisty temper could only be tolerated because of her amazing outer beauty. Camille in her youth was graceful and well-built. You could paint portraits of her face. A light blush was always colorful on the delicate pink aviator, the girls framing it, delicate blonde curls. Camille's eyes were big and bright blue. Her nose was small, and her lovely lips had a beautiful shape and pleasant fullness. Camille was now in her 50s, but she remained an interesting woman, a friend. She always told me that she enjoyed the attention of men. This was the real truth. Indeed, after her father, she had had many suitors who pecked not only at her physical attractiveness, but also at her financial solvency. Stephen was used to having strange men show up at their house and then disappear. He didn't even bother to memorize their names. All these men seemed to him to be just background to his life, and cheap and of poor quality, something small and insignificant, not worthy of attention. None of these living characters could compare to the image of his tragically departed father. His departure happened quite unexpectedly and broke the whole destiny of a 9-year-old boy. One day, Sam went on tour with the circus. They were quite successful. That year, it was a dry, hot summer, and for some unknown reason deep in the night, most of the circus group members died in a fire. The performers had saved money on a hotel, and so they slept in caravans. From one of them, the fire spread to the others, and the hot flames spared no one. Only 2 administrators returned to their hometown, who did not skimp to spend the night in the hotel at their own expense. That was that. One afternoon, Stephen was left alone. Yes, he lived with his mother, but her attitude to her son was rather cool. Therefore, after the death of his father, the boy could not find anywhere that blessed source of unconditional love, which accepts the whole person and forgives him imperfections. Stephen would have liked to remain an open, brave, and kind boy, but circumstances did not allow him. His mother demanded that he stop being a sissy, went all the way, and with others behaved harshly. And all the peers, who subserviently ingratiated to him during his father's lifetime, now became insolent and insolent. They had been taking revenge on Stephen for years for Sam's strength. They laughed, they called him names, they beat him. At first he tolerated it, but then he became embittered and defensive, and showed his classmates his rage all at once. He didn't have to be friends with anyone else, but they stopped touching the boy. There was a big scandal at school when he bit their hands like an animal. He was stigmatized at meetings and councils, but no one wanted to understand the true motives behind the child's behavior. No one ever recognized that he was beating his teeth into the hands that had repeatedly stabbed him. No one ever realized that it was an outburst of humiliated boyish ego. After this incident, Faber Jr. was enlisted in the category of vicious bullies, but he did not make excuses to anyone. It was to his advantage. Finally, his classmates would leave him alone, afraid to avoid him. As always, people bowed their heads to boldness and strength. Stephen liked being alone more and more. He consciously chose silence. The boy rejoiced when classes were over and ran home with pleasure. There he would immerse himself and enjoy the solitude. His mother was always late at work, but even if she came home early, she was rarely interested in her son's affairs. All her questions were superficial, and she never listened to the answers. Camille was fantastically engrossed in her life. In the evenings, she and her girlfriends liked to go to restaurants, have another glass of expensive champagne or dabble in brandy, then spend time with a man and leave for an all-nighter with her beau at a hotel, or bring the Playboy home. Stephen spent all his free time on the computer. All his friends were on the other side of the screen. He loved the confined space of his own home and never went out. Camille had told her son explicitly that she dreamed of him living an independent life. And now, after he had dropped out of training, her hopes of getting rid of her own child soon were dashed. So she decided to lock him up. And Camille methodically sued her son for lack of a job. She strongly disliked his friends and girlfriends, although there weren't many. In the end, she gave him an ultimatum to either go to work for her firm or move out of the house to earn his own bread. Stephen was stuck in the office for over 2 weeks undergoing training. His mother strictly monitored it herself, sorting out his gaps in knowledge, blunders, and mistakes in practice. However, to her surprise, the woman began to notice that her son was rapidly advancing in the profession, had a good sense, and developed analytical skills. She did not wonder where her eyes had been before and why she thought the boy was an Ulyss. The woman was accustomed to extract her own benefit from any situation, so she immediately put her son in a responsible position so that everything would look rank in the eyes of inspecting organizations and in front of employees. Camille bought her son a fake diploma, and he officially started working. If in this son began to suit her completely, now she clung to his personal life, demanded to get a permanent lady of the heart, said that she wanted grandchildren. Stephen wondered to himself why she would do that. She rarely sees her son, and she communicates through the lip. And here are grandchildren. Probably her friends have made their own. She's got nothing to brag about. Stephen introduced her to 2 girls from the office. He said that he was friends with these young ladies and that they worked for her. Camille met them for a long time, explaining that these pseudo-ladies are not suitable for the role of his girlfriends at all. Stephen began to avoid such conversations, but his mother became more and more insistent every day. The boy was discouraged by her pressure and constantly invented excuses to run away from home. He could not tell his own mother that it was her example that had formed his disdain for women. He looked upon them only as objects for the fulfillment of his intimate needs. Stephen thought they were all mindless dolls. It did not even occur to him that girls could be interesting individuals. The prospect of a marriage relationship in general made him giddy and twitchy. He remembered for the rest of his life how his father suffered, how he wanted to be independent of his wife's whims. But his mother had blackmailed him, using her son's responsible attitude and guilt. The only things Stephen held dear in this world were professions and the personal freedom of a girl he did not cling to by means of charm, intelligence, or modesty. He paid attention only to physical data, evaluated the figure, height, breast size, curves of the body. The guy did not even imagine that such a lady would be with him constantly every minute, irritate him with her rank. He had set a boundary of socializing with women, right from his bed. They were headed out the door. Stephen loved solitude and did not tolerate even his mother's presence around him, and strangers were out of the question. But one had to know Camille to realize she would not stop until she got the desired result. It was not necessary to wait long, because she herself decisively organized a date for her son with the girl she liked. Stephen decided not to contradict his mother in order not to create a conflict situation. He agreed to this play. In the shower, of course. The guy was furious, or his mother's wave of rage. And how was it not to be indignant? This woman had given complete oblivion to his childhood years and now brazenly invaded his private life. She's the right woman for you, Evelyn. Recently moved to our neighborhood, well-to-do parents, but she's so eager to live on her own. I found her a house a few days ago, not far from ours for rent. I've been in touch with her family. They're our equals. I've known her mother since I was a student. Emily was one of the nicest and most well-mannered girls at the Institute, and if Jenna's the name of the girl is anything like her mother, and I'm pretty sure you'll like her. Stephen was nervous about his upcoming meeting with this young lady and resented the match. There's no point in inviting her over. She'll be embarrassed. We'll talk on neutral territory, Camille suggested. It was her mother's decision. Stephen wondered very much how she had managed to let the situation out of her control. He sighed with relief and nodded in agreement. Jenna picked him up. The next evening, Stephen left the house. In a shallow glimpse of rain, he saw a silver open-top Chevy pull into the driveway. The car wasn't new, but it looked solid. A bright brunette with a boyish haircut jumped out. Leather jacket, dry red pants, and a turquoise scarf around her neck. What looked like cowboy boots and bright cherry lipstick. She slammed one hand on the hood. With the other, she dutifully obeyed. No, this girl was not cultured, quiet. Straight back, swift gait, confident look, pretty mouth and round aching chin. A graceful nose. Stephen felt a power emanating from this social lady. She gave him a firm hand and manfully squeezed his fingers in her palm. I suppose you know my name. She turned to Stephen. That's right. You do, he smiled. A sly expression appeared on Jenna's face. Well, I know all about you from Camille. Worthless, weak-willed, in need of constant attention and feminine care. That's how she characterized her own son. Stephen came closer to the girl, put his arms around her waist, and pressed her against him. My mother was so busy with herself that she didn't even notice how her son grew up, became a man without her participation. That's why the picture she has in her head doesn't match reality at all. Yeah, I'm a lone wolf. Yes, I'm a lone wolf. I'm not made for sentiment. But I know how to communicate with women, and you will have the opportunity to make sure of it. Laughing guy in the face of the command. The girl was not embarrassed and did not pull away. She calmly endured direct eye contact with him, and even smirked slightly. When Stephen let go of Jenna, she walked around the car, leaned over to the control panel, and performed some simple manipulations. Immediately, the top of the car tilted up. But then let's get away from this house and into the wind, the girl suggested. Stephen opened the doors in front of her, and then sat down in the comfortable chair next to her. That's a hell of a car you've got. How long has it been yours? Evelyn's been asking for about a year. My girl's a fire. And she got into a long conversation about battery valves and gasoline prices. What made Stephen realize he was a passionate car enthusiast? I've been having trouble with the open top, keeps coming down at the worst possible times, just like a pain in the ass. The girl continued her monologue. Before breaking down, there is a peculiar sound. I stop the car and strengthen it manually. Behind the conversation, Stephen did not notice how it began to blow his nose, and the sky was covered with steel clouds. It looks like we need to look for a secluded spot. It's getting darker by the minute. It looks like it's going to rain. Stephen turned to the girl. I know a cozy place. Let's go. Evelyn put on the gas. She drove Stephen to a restaurant on the other side of town. A few steps from her house, the parking lot employee grinned into his mustache. As she helped the guy open the door, the car door, it jammed shut. Stephen felt as if the girl was patronizing him. It caused some awkwardness, but at the same time it felt good. Stephen had grown up in a deficit of care and could therefore appreciate its manifestations. He lifted his head up, and at the same moment streams of water rushed down from the sky. The young men ran toward the restaurant. Half-darkness reigned there, and a snowy melody poured through the hall. The bartender looked sympathetically at Jenna and Stephen. He gestured with his hand to call them to follow him. In the back room, the guy handed them 2 strong towels, and they wiped their damp heads. The bartender smiled affectionately at the girl. "You're adventurous as always." Stephen realized that Jenna and the young man had known each other for a long time. "Well, yes, it's me." The girl laughed. All 3 of them returned to the hall. Evelyn approached a vacant table in its depths. "Come here," she whispered toward Stephen. He walked toward her, and she pulled him toward the table. There they sat across from each other. Soon a waiter approached the couple, and they placed their order. Or rather, Evelyn made it. She was very attentive to Stephen, and it seemed to him that it was not Camille, but she herself who had taken the initiative to get acquainted. Jenna quickly understood his tastes and predilections. She took a quick look at the menu and decided what he would drink and eat. What she chose, surprising, was her preference in alcohol. In large portions, she devoured Jack Daniels, and Stephen picked up a bottle of collectible red wine. It was immediately obvious that Evelyn was a regular at this establishment, because all of its employees were eager to please her, plowing around like moths. Suddenly, Stephen realized that the society of this girl was very pleasant to him. He did not let himself be broken by his mother, did not succumb to her influence. But Jenna's strength is soft, quite different. She was attentive, showed great interest in the life of the guy, and unobtrusively cared. That's the payoff. Stephen asked her to tell me about herself. I was surprised at how interesting the girl's fate was. She was a little older than him by more than 2 years. She was born into a well-to-do family, but early on she wanted independence, so she started her own business several times. The initial capital was allocated to her by her father, but the first attempts were unsuccessful. He failed. "Now I'm doing just fine." She smiled, taking one sip of whiskey after another. It was amazing, but Jenna had become a successful businesswoman. She owned several fashion magazines. This girl was obsessed with everything. She passionately talked to Stephen about the intricacies of her profession, and then, feeling that her narration bored the interlocutor, told the guy about her hobbies. They were somewhat extreme. Hiking in the mountains, racing on kayaks on raging strong rivers, swimming in forbidden places. Stephen could only wonder that his new acquaintance was not into space travel. At the end of the evening, he was fascinated by the girl. Her determination, courage, and faith in her own strength could be envied by any man. He was afraid to admit to himself that the girl had touched his heart. Jenna was different from many others. She was interesting to be with. Among many charming, intelligent, and beautiful women, she stood out. There was in her some kind of mesmerizing mystery. Next to this girl's soul arose some inexplicable awe. Wanted to drown in a relationship with this reckless representative of the weaker sex. Stephen caught himself at the thought that all his previous romances did not cause him the desire to open up and behave relaxed. They had been smooth, unremarkable encounters with a slight tinge of lust. How many of them had been such, arousing his quiet interest? Dozens, hundreds. In general, Stephen was driven by a single desire to add to his collection of men. By and large, these were women who were completely alien to him. Jenna, on the other hand, had managed to become his own for the evening. He didn't want to part with her. In all, her appearance distorted such inner confidence that she involuntarily attracted looks from the outside. But that wasn't what attracted a man. I have not seen such beauties. With amazement, he caught himself at the thought that he admired her swift gait, radiant smile, manner of gesticulating. Stephen watched with awe the new feeling that was budding in the depths of his soul. It was an attractive one. The condition was unusual for him. It bathed him in cocktails, excitement, involvement. The guy couldn't understand at all what was clinging to his dictates. It was something inexplicable. He'd only met her today, but he'd immediately accepted all of her as she was. Now it seemed to him that he had known her for years. This was the way she was his own. He felt no shadow of embarrassment or discomfort in her presence. Stephen realized that he was completely relaxed around her. Literally, within hours, he realized that this was his woman. Not once did he get bored while talking to her. Not once did he think about business or anyone else. Evelyn, really absorbing all his attention. At the same time, the girl was not intrusive and did not claim adoration or love. Stephen realized that in front of him was a completely independent person, and whatever their relationship in the future, he would not be able to own her completely. Jenna would always have her own world, hidden from everyone else, only at her own will. She will open the doors to it briefly and only to a select few, but will never fully let anyone in, ever. Not because she does not trust, but because it is her way of life, the need to have that very soulful island where you can freely enjoy your own fantasies, dreams, and reflections. "Let's date," Stephen suggested. "Girls, seriously," she laughed. "Yes, I think we're right for each other. Or maybe I'm wrong," he asked. "No, it seems that way." Evelyn looked at him point blank, and then Stephen felt a languid, passionate feeling enveloping him, despite the fire of desire that had enveloped him. He remained outwardly calm and cold. Jenna looked at him with her marvelous velvet brown eyes, and Stephen read understanding in them. The girl silently rose from the table, and he followed her. The rain had stopped outside, and the city was illuminated by the last rays of the setting sun. They raced in her limousine through the empty streets. Then a thick purple twilight descended upon the land. The couple entered a posh house with no one inside. Evelyn led Stephen into her bedroom. The room was in semi-darkness. She turned on only one night light, offered him a shower, and after he heard herself disappear into the bathroom, she came into view. Stephen, about 10 minutes later, and without false fuss, threw off her towels. The boy followed her example. He admiringly looked over her slender young body, then boldly approached her and enclosed the girl in an embrace. Even in intimacy, she did not belong to him completely. He then slipped away, then hot, then cold change of her emotional states, surprised and turned the guy on at the same time. He really wanted to possess her in every way. But even after he had possessed the girl and was left with the feeling that Jenna did not belong to anyone, nevertheless, he enjoyed being with her immensely. She knew what men wanted and knew how to enjoy intimacy with them herself. The girl easily gave him her body, but she wouldn't let anyone near her soul. Well, he pondered, so be it, but she's the most amazing woman I've ever met. Yes, I realize there will always be a distance between us. This is a woman who is a loner by nature. And of course, she'll never be my wife. She just won't want to lose her freedom. But I won't force her. Let her be with me only as long as she wants to be with me. She'll leave. It'll hurt, but I'll let her go because I realize Evelyn is a free bird. And no shackles, not even the greatest love or passion, can keep her from flying solo. And now he enjoyed any communication with the beautiful girl, her gaze, not arbitrary body movement, languid sigh, and next to her the whole world remained somewhere behind. Stephen was immersed in that unchanging mystery of being when he and she were alone together. They were united by a strong attraction. Stephen could not regulate his communication with Evelyn. The place and meetings were always chosen by her herself, and he only waited to listen to the roar of the engine of her Cadillac. The guy waited and prepared for every date with her, so the feeling he harbored for the young woman was a pinch of longing. He realized that someday this connection would suddenly cut off, and he would lose forever. She overshadowed all his other women, became that fatal beauty, next to which it was impossible to hook up even one innocent affair. The other ladies lost to her from the beginning because they dissolved in the shadow of her charisma. She was too bright and wonderfully nun-like. Evelyn's relationship was passionate, and at the same time, there was a certain detachment between them from each other. The girl often plunged into her inner world and revealed to the guy only some of her qualities. Therefore, Stephen sometimes felt abandoned and lonely. Sometimes he had no information for weeks about what his beloved was doing, but he bore it stoically. It was ready to tolerate everything for the sake of a couple of dates with her. Anticipation about the end of their relationship constantly tormented the soul of the man, as if he stood on a slippery stone in the middle of the raging elements and was afraid to fall. But the tragedy that occurred in life was more terrible than all his fantasies. It literally tore his soul to shreds. Stephen certainly knew that his woman had other men, and she often spent time with them. But the horrible revelation was that Evelyn was on drugs, and had been for a long time. Throughout their entire relationship, he had never noticed any signs of it. This sad circumstance determined the final chords of their love. Once again, Evelyn disappeared for a long time, and she was found breathless in a city hotel room. The cause of death was a drug overdose. Stephen was running around like a wounded animal. He wasn't ready to let Jenna go, not for good. He hadn't intruded into her world while she was alive, but to lose her irrevocably. No, it was beyond him. This tragedy had transformed Stephen from a young boy into a mature man. He had no friend or family shoulder to lean on during this difficult time. He experienced personal misfortune all alone, and it broke the lad's soul. He was still long stranger to the bottomless gaze. Jenna's velvet voice. Some nights he'd jump out of bed covered in vapors. He thought he could taste the sweet taste of her lips and the exultant scent of her body. In time, Stephen came to terms with it, but a ringing emptiness settled inside him. He began to fill it with alcohol and promiscuous sex. In the moment, when the man got drunk and indulged in flat successes with strangers, it seemed to him that the pain was going away. However, when he woke up in the morning, heavy emotions encompassed his soul in an even tighter ring. Stephen sank deeper and deeper into the abyss of drunkenness and debauchery. In this frenzy, he could not even properly mourn the departure of his mother, did not want to forgive her coldness and indifference, and he could not let her go to the next world with gratitude for his birth and all that she had given him on this sinful earth. The resentment remained in his heart. Stephen was fiercely angry at his mother and his beloved as if they were alive. The only thing that kept him afloat was business worries sobering the young man. As he labored in the office, he felt like a man wallowing in the pain of loss. Stephen realized that he was probably doomed to be alone. To meet someone like Evelyn again was impossible. He had given up hope of personal happiness. To keep from going mad, he was looking for new adventures. And now, with a swaggering, unsteady gait, he was walking through the city. Soft light poured in from the windows of the houses, and appetizing smells wafted through the windows. Somewhere a television was on, somewhere music was playing. It seemed to the man that there in the walls of these houses all people were happy, and someone needed them. He was in a hurry to get rid of this feeling and to leave the territory, where smelled cozy and happiness. Not because he was jealous, but because he was getting worse there. The man's hair fluttered in the wind, and he kept walking, unable to see the road. Out of the lilac haze of fog, a woman's silhouette appeared right in front of him, and he boldly went to get acquainted. The lady was beautiful and uninhibited. He stood in front of her and put his hand on her shoulder. The stranger did not even flinch, and Stephen felt better, for he felt the warmth of a human body. There was a gaping emptiness and an animalistic glint in the woman's eyes. He understood her without words, took her under his arm, and together they moved forward. At the inn, the night guest treated Stephen without resistance or objection. She gave herself to him. At 12 o'clock, he woke up in bed and found a luscious, hungover blonde beside him. His head split open, but he needed to get to the office. As he silently started to pack, the girl's face reflected bewilderment. "Were you paid to stay until 2? Let's stay together. We spent such a beautiful night." Stephen nodded silently. Overcoming the growing disgust in his soul was a mixture of guilt and squeamishness. He had experienced it when saying goodbye to random ladies. This condition was repeated every time. Stephen carefully concealed this attitude from his partners, but could do nothing about his own feelings. "I'm gonna shower and go to work. Will you leave a phone number?" the blonde asked. "Text me yours. I'll call you back." It was a phrase Stephen said to every woman he spent the night with, but he never called any of them back. Under the cool lines of the water, he came to his senses, but the munchies from last night were slowly wearing off. Feeling the degrees still playing in his body, Stephen decided to walk to the office. It was not far. He easily covered the distance of 1 block, but the day was heating up, and the hot August sun glared down on the young man. Stephen unbuttoned his shirt collar and walked over to the fountain. He realized that it would look rather strange. A successful businessman washing his face right in this urban facility. But right now he didn't care. Stephen walked over to one of the pounding water features and put his head under it, the illuminating currents doing their thing. He was immediately relieved and moved forward. In the public garden where the fountain was playing, not far away on a bench sat a girl. Passing by her, Stephen heard quiet sobs. Involuntarily, he turned around. The stranger was very thin and pale. Not a gram of makeup. Thin fingers of hands nervously passing pens. Textile bags full of tears. Big blue eyes. Stephen sat down next to her. "So, what are we giving here?" With a sneer, he asked. The girl flinched. The young man expected her to rudely answer him to jump up from the bench and run away. However, she turned to him and often clapped her eyes. "You know, I am grateful to you for asking me what I am crying about. No one has asked me that for a long time. No one I know cares. They're all in a hurry. I think they're running away from their own and other people's problems. They don't want to empathize with their neighbors. It's like it's none of their business. It is easier to pass by than to get into the problem or help trustingly," the stranger shared with him. "Someone will say that you should leave your worries at home. But I have almost no close people. There is no one to ease my soul. One grandmother. She won't say no, she'll listen. But there are things I can't tell her. I'm afraid of disturbing her." Stephen looked at the girl with surprise and was amazed that she was so hasty in opening her soul to a stranger. He noticed that the stranger was very modestly dressed and realized her income was very modest. He did not feel sorry for the girl, but the situation was curious. Therefore, Stephen did not interrupt her, but listened attentively. "You know, I went around all the offices in search of a job, and everywhere rejected. No experience. And my grandmother's pension is not even enough for food. She's a sick person, even though she's keeping up. But she's a sick person. A lot of money is spent on medicines, and utilities have to be paid. But I can't help her at all. She raised me. She gave everything, lived for me. And I don't get a chance to thank her. I can't get a job. That's all. I have no strength left. I just sit and cry." She cried deeply again. Stephen looked at her more closely and thought that he had never made such an unusual acquaintance before. "And what is your education?" he asked philologically. "I just went to school to get a job. There's a gymnasium across the square, and a teacher was needed." Stephen scratched the back of his head, and an absolutely wild idea occurred to him, and he voiced it. "I need a secretary here. Oh, take me. I know the computer." The girl exclaimed hopefully. "Well, you're in luck. I am the owner of a respectable brokerage firm, and I can help. I think you are literate in this regard." "Yes, I have a red diploma." The girl rummaged through her bag and showed it to Stephen. He pretended to scrutinize it. "Well, I'll hire you if you want to," and the girl's eyes flashed genuine interest. "Really? Why? Am I really going to deceive inexperienced ladies?" At these words, the stranger blushed thickly. "I'm very grateful to you. You're just saving me." Her eyes are more important again. "But don't feel bad, Wendy." She stared at Stephen in surprise. "How do you know my name?" "From my diploma, actually. I showed it to her." "Oh yes," the girl smiled trustingly. "But I have one condition," the man continued. "Oh, anything you want," the girl promised. And Stephen decided to make an experiment, to create a tempting situation for this young girl to see how she would react. He stood up and examined her from head to toe. And his type, of course. However, the girl's looks were pleasant. And the more he interacted with her, the more attractive he found her. Wendy had a lovely doll face with bottomless eyes, a dainty nose and pretty lips. She had stopped crying, and a delicate blush and charming round dimples appeared on her girlish cheeks. Stephen scratched the back of his head, then began to adjust the belt on his pants. "Well, anyway, you're going to have to do me an intimate favor." "Well, right there in the office on your first day of work." After these words, Wendy often blinked her eyes. Her eyebrows rose up in surprise. "That's a must. But somehow I wanted to pay for everything in this life." "How did you put it?" "You don't have the money, so we'll take someone else's." Wendy was completely confused and insulted, jumped up from the bench, but then pulled herself together and boldly looked Stephen in the face. "Give me the address, please. I'll come to apply for a job. I'll be there. It won't cost me anything. We'll be able to provide for my grandmother and me." "That's right," he said. "Your salary will be good." Stephen gave the address of the office and said goodbye to the girl. He was sure she would change her mind, wouldn't come to work tomorrow. Some fleeting, joyful feeling, like sunlight slipping among the clouds, lighted up the man's heart, but it immediately disappeared into the depths of his dark thoughts. Looking at the man's receding figure, Wendy felt uneasy. How to go to him tomorrow? And why give herself to a stranger? She had no choice. The strength taken from years of hardship was running out. She and her grandmother needed a piece of bread. So Wendy had no qualms about the ordeal ahead of her. Of course, it was unpleasant. After all, she had never had a man before. But life had left her no choice. She couldn't sit on her grandmother's neck all the time. Wendy remembered her unhappy childhood. She'd once had a full family, a mother and father, and even a philosopher grandfather. A picture of him teaching her to read from a children's primer came to mind, on the porch of the village house. And then came this misfortune. Her parents had traveled with her to her grandmother's house, and there had been a gas leak. Only Vanessa and Wendy survived, thanks to the fact that they were sleeping in the far bedroom, window open. But despite this, they were also taken away from there by ambulance in serious condition. The doctors managed to pump the victims out, and then began a difficult litigation with the guardianship. Wendy wanted to take away from her grandmother because of her low income and advanced age. But the spirited woman fought to the end and won her granddaughter back. She realized that she could not give her a wide range of opportunities in life, but she could surround the little girl with warmth and love. And the woman did everything possible and even impossible to raise her granddaughter. Yeah, they didn't have much. Sometimes they even had to borrow food from a neighbor before the guardianship came. They both looked at them, drooling, but they couldn't touch them. And after the patronage of the social services, they took everything back. But they didn't want to part. Native people who loved each other, no one else could give them such happiness. And so, overcoming all adversity, they stayed together. Through ill health, Vanessa was engaged in lessons with her granddaughter. This made her a very good student. This allowed Wendy to enter on a budget. She remembered how she and her grandmother celebrated the occasion, with homemade wine from grapes that grew on their plot and fragrant strawberries from their own vegetable garden. It was small, but kept in perfect order. You bet, because they had been feeding from it for a whole year. They managed to grow potatoes, beets, onions, dried apples from the forest for the winter. However, they had enough cherry jam to stock up on. Is 2 women too much to ask? Of course, Wendy wanted to have beautiful clothes and in childhood toys. But from a very early age, she realized that there was something more important than things. She treasured that warm and affectionate relationship with her grandmother, and she thanked God that she wasn't taken from her somewhere. Wendy was used to labor and discipline from childhood. Her grandmother's upbringing helped her to keep the best human qualities in her and always be herself. The girl knew that she was very strong, but now her soul was broken. Not every young shoulders could withstand the hardships she went through. However, the girl did not cry anymore, wiped the tears from her eyes, and decided that she would definitely go tomorrow to the office at the named address and do everything this paperman asked her to do. And then she would work faithfully. Wendy went to her home. She was in a state of confusion. The joy of finding a job had been covered up by a lewd offer from her future boss. The rest of the day flew by. To forget a little and shake off the unpleasant feelings, Wendy did all the chores around the house, whatever she could get her hands on. By evening, she was tired. I decided to call Grandma for tea. Anticipating the pleasure, she cut in half a loaf and abundantly smeared it with apple jam. Although here she put the impressively sized sandwich in front of her grandmother. "Well, Grandma, do you want a hearty meal?" "Oh, that's what I mean. To live a life of pleasure," laughed Vanessa. "Yeah," agreed Wendy. "Now I'm going to shower, and I'll get in touch, and we'll go for a promenade before bed." The sun was sloping towards sunset when she and her grandmother went for a walk. They decided to walk all the way to the quarry. Not the nearest light, but pleasantly reasoned Wendy. The rest of the day flew by. Wendy and Grandma loved these summer evenings. Easy for both of them. Walking along the forest road beneath tall pines, the quarry appeared in the distance, but already you could make out its dark Moldovan water. The crowns of the young spruce trees that had been planted near it a few years ago. Soon they approached it and started throwing small pebbles into the water from the shore. Imperceptibly, the lilac twilight thickened over them, and the travelers hurried home. They did not want to walk through the forest in the dark, but on the narrow forest road they met a very ancient old Bradshaw woman with a stick in her hand. "Would you say, sweetheart?" she asked. "There's a high voltage far out here." "We haven't heard of one," replied Wendy. As she got closer, the girl was able to make out the passers-by. She was about 80 years old, no less. "Oh my God. I've been reading too much. I think I'm lost. Where does this road lead to?" "To the city." "Where do you want to go?" Vanessa asked. "Oh, then I'm going the wrong way." The old woman fussed, turning back. Wendy looked up at the sky. It was only a little over half an hour before it was completely dark. "Wait, where are you going?" "There's no high voltage that way either. This road goes all the way to the quarry and ends there." "Where did you come from?" "From a cottage farm, from the forest." "So I have a cottage there, and the live one is now in mine. So you're coming from there now, with the forest." Vanessa mentally estimated the trajectory loomed decent kilometers. She marveled at the antics. But you won't make it back in the light. The forest is big, and in some places heavily overbolten. Only this road is rented by hunters, but it breaks off near the forest. People have often been confused in this area. They've even found human remains of travelers who lost their way in the forest and couldn't find their way out. "Look, it'll be dark soon. You won't find your way back in the dark. It'll only get more confusing. Come with us. And in the morning, you'll take the train to your place. It leaves around 800. The woman recovered a little, but then she agreed. On the way, she said that she went to the forest from early morning and imperceptibly passing from mushrooms from berries. Berries deepened into the thicket for about 7 kilometers. And that's if you count in a straight line. One could only wonder at her vigor and physical endurance. At her age, "I'm from the city myself," my grandmother said. "My father used to live there, but we moved away a long time ago. I was a girl. My mother died early, right after giving birth. My father was 6 years old when he got married. Then he married a woman, and we went to live with her. She made an excellent stepmother. Not everyone can find such a mother. She was so nice. She's dead now, of course. God rest her soul. And my father's in the other world, and my husband has recently left. But I'm still living. 3 kids. God sent them. Good, caring ones. But they've gone to different cities." Such frankness of a random travel companion surprised Wendy, and she, herself, not understanding why, suddenly revealed to her companion all today's story that had happened to her in the park. Vanessa looked at her surprised, but did not utter a word of reproach. "I'll tell it all out loud. The girl breathed a sigh of relief and felt as if a huge stone had fallen off her soul, interfering with her life further, spilling everything to a stranger. And she listened, nodding and mumbling to herself. During the conversation, they did not notice how they approached the town. At home, they took the grandmother as their own. And in the daylight, she did not seem so ancient. The women offered her shelter, a warm bed and hot tea with a loaf generously smeared with jam. The rays of light and the old woman's eyes were full of gratitude. After tea, she lay down and fell fast asleep. And on the morning before work, Wendy accompanied her to the electric train, comfortably settled in the carriage. Smiling grandmother in the open window waved goodbye to the girl, wrinkles in hand. "Thank you, honey, that you did not abandon on the road. It's no big deal. You don't go into the woods alone anymore, do you? It's scary. You might not get any help." "Thank you. I won't. I've had enough of walking." She smiled and suddenly added, "And you, daughter, don't think that nothing just happens in the world. Go get a job. And that guy, don't be afraid. You'll do as he asked. Unexpected happiness will come into your life. Take my word for it." The train rumbled and moved off. At a loss, Wendy followed it. She forever remembered the kind, old woman's face and her shrewd, tenacious gaze. With 3 novelties, Wendy went to the broker's office. And what was Stephen's surprise when he saw yesterday's acquaintance outside his office? And she'd arrived before the office opened. Charming what? He thought. What am I going to do with her in terms of intimacy? And why would I want her? It's silly. Well, a young girl like that will be a wonder to me. Oh, hello, young one. He turned to Wendy. Honestly, I thought you weren't coming. You would have shown up sooner, though. Well done. But let's see how you do after you've checked in with HR, shall we? Let's go. He took her under his arm and led her into the office. Stephen felt her stiffen up, all wooden. "Yeah, relax," he said. "I'm not touching. Let's get organized. And by lunchtime you'll be in my office," she explained. The girl raised her trusting eyes to him and nodded silently. Stephen noticed this time what beautiful, delicately furniture-colored hair she had had when they first met. It had been gathered into a ponytail, and now it fell loosely over her shoulders. It caused him to feel pleasantly under a cloud of sexual fantasy. Stephen walked into his office and immersed himself in his work. In contrast to his frivolous attitude towards the female sex, he went about his work in a collected and businesslike manner. He only broke away from it when Wendy timidly poked her pretty head in the doorway. Frankly, he had already forgotten about the girl. "May I come in?" she asked. "Oh, in time," he laughed. "I really am. I really want to, since you came, and we have a contract. In general. Let's do everything quickly and disperse. You're already registered in the personnel department." "Formalized," the girl answered fearfully. Stephen got up from his seat, walked to the door, and turned the key in the lock. "Well, hurry up and show me what you can do." Wendy began to slowly undress. "What's this?" Stephen's eyes rounded, and he stared in bewilderment at the knit pantaloons, small blue florals. "Lingerie," the girl answered bewilderedly. "From what grandmother's trunk did you get them?" The man just rolled with laughter. "No, my dear, they are not lingerie," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "It's some kind of priority cling." He wrinkled his nose. "Look, go to work sometime. That's a very exotic outfit you're wearing." "I wanted something." He couldn't help himself and laughed. "I feel like I've undressed my grandmother. Go. I'm unilaterally terminating our contract. You're making me cry. Go ahead and don't take offense. But I'm really not mean." He often wanted to show off his sexual exploits to his buddies, but the pantaloon story suddenly became personal and untouchable. It was funny, but he didn't want to reveal it to any third party. Stephen caught himself smiling blissfully as he stared into space. "Good thing I have a separate office," he thought, and got to work. Wendy slipped out of his business suite and froze by the door. Complete confusion reigned in her soul. The girl didn't know what she should do. to be upset because she had caused Homeric laughter at the chief, or to rejoice that he had lost his desire for Polonsky like a tomato. She returned to her seat and tried to concentrate on her work. The next day, Stephen came through the reception area. He said hello to his regular secretary. Nancy was a beautiful lady with a mind-blowing figure, large breasts and round hips, hers colored in various light shades. Her hair was gathered on her head in such a ponytail. Her makeup was bright and professional. She sat by the computer simply, nodding her perfectly painted guesses at the keyboard. He glanced toward Wendy. She, too, was at her workstation. Meeting the chief's gaze, she all folded up and literally squirmed in her office chair. Stephen felt as if the fragile girl was about to disappear into space. "Hello," he said casually. "You could say congratulations on your first day of work. Yesterday was a baptism of fire." He smirked meaningfully, and the girl blushed. "I will." What questions he had for Nancy. She's in the business. "Nancy," he turned to the secretary. "You distributing the duties so that it's easier for her for now. What about you is more complicated. You understand, while she gets up to speed." Of course, Stephen performed everything to the best of his ability. "She's a girl. She's got a high typing speed. I checked it out. We have a lot of turnover. I'll just give it to her now, and I'll take care of the urgent stuff." "Nancy, what a clever girl you are," Stephen said with admiration. A satisfied smile stretched across the blonde's face, and Stephen entered his office and immediately forgot about both ladies. He was so absorbed in his work that he often didn't hear what was going on around him. When the man left the office in the evening, he found Wendy alone in the waiting room. "This is for you." Stephen pulled out of the bag several packages of expensive French underwear. "That these are normal underpants?" He grinned. The girl blushed thickly. "You what?" "I don't need anything." "Yes, you do. I saw it with my own eyes." "And what you have? Burn it. In fact, you know what? I'll give you a bonus. You go to closet, change your hair. You know, all that feminine stuff. And that's a must, of course. Otherwise, I'll fire you for sure." "Well convinced," she agreed. While Stephen went down to the exit of the building, on his face waited a mysterious smile. But it happened to buy underpants for the secretary, not for his mistress, not for his wife, but just from the street. He shrugged his shoulders, but noted to himself that he was in an elevated mood. A week later, Nancy literally burst in on him with a perplexed look. She turned to the chief. "Stephen, but what a good girl. Indeed, her help is invaluable. But I can't get her to dress differently. It's such junk that our partners are horrified when they look in the waiting room." Stephen took his head off the papers, and it hit him. The girl had absolutely no money, and he'd forgotten what he'd said about the bonus. "Nancy, I'll take care of this matter myself. Go to your office," he commanded. When the man left his office, it was already dark outside the window. It was the 11th hour of the night, and Wendy was still sitting at her desk in the same pose. "What are you doing here so late?" he wondered. "Yes, I wasted a lot of time while I was sorting it out, and the documentation needs to be done for tomorrow. So I stayed late," quietly whispered the girl. "And you diligently," grinned Stephen. "It's a pity only in the business sphere, in others not so much." He gave her a sly look. Wendy stood up from the table and mumbled embarrassedly. "Well, I've finished. Permission to go." "I'm not." Stephen said with ostentatious distinction that it was getting late, and such valuable employees I prefer to drive personally. "So please, mademoiselle, gentlemen, welcome to my private car." He theatrically gave the girl his hand, and she trustingly accepted it. Together they went downstairs. He opened the car door for her, and she settled into the front seat. The engine roared to life, and the crossover sped off. Wendy gave a startled gasp. "Oh, come on. Stephen, we're in town, not on the highway. You're telling me off. Tell me, please, what's the right one? Just a few days in the office, and I'm on the short end of the stick with the brass." And he laughed. "But since you're so brave, I'm sure you'll take my remark adequately." "Oh, and how to her remarks?" The girl got worried. Of course, Speak up, I'll fix everything. Well, it is not on the documents. Do not worry, he calmed the girl. It's on your appearance. You see how stylish Nancy is. You, too, need to tidy up your closet to match your business status. But we've safely replaced some of the old stuff. At least I hope so. Stephen glanced meaningfully at Wendy, and she lowered her eyes. Come on, you're embarrassed in front of the chief, with whom you were one step away from an intimate moment. Remembering the situation, the man was in a playful mood. So I haven't gotten Stephen's first paycheck yet to buy the clothes I need, justified Wendy. But I can't wait for you to get it. It's in the accounting department, and I can't give it to you sooner. Why don't you and I stop by the convenience store and pick out something for tomorrow anyway? Nancy's been buzzing around. It's a distraction from work. But why would you want to spend so much money? Asked the girl. Wendy exhaled tiredly. Stephen, but let's go in private. Call me Stephen. That's one. And two is let me decide for myself, unnecessary or not unnecessary. Not for me. Why don't you cut the crap and wear it normally? And then we'll decide about this money, all right? Wendy nodded in agreement. Stephen led the girl to a boutique with very expensive clothes to her questioning and indignant look. He had already prepared the necessary arguments. I run an expensive firm and my secretaries have to be dressed up. Accordingly, you may not blink your lovely eyes. I don't accept any objections. Girl, he called the salesgirl. Would you be kind enough to match my girl's strict office bow? He glanced contentedly at the remote Baroque lady, then took a seat on the plush sofa and began leisurely digging through his phone messages. When Wendy came out of the prime, paid again, and business attire, he gave a contented thumbs up and calmly said, well, that's what I wanted. Just perfect. Now you look appropriate to your status. Thank you. He turned to the girl serving them. Then he paid for his purchases and drove Wendy home. She got out of the car with a happy smile and thanked him for the purchases. Well, let's go, it's getting late, and there's a lot of work tomorrow. I did it not only for you, but also for me. Good night. He drove off, flashing his headlights for her. After driving a few meters away, Stephen stopped the car and wondered inwardly. In him woke up such a mischievous boy who seemed to sleep for many years. The man realized that he liked these feelings very much, and they were directly related to Wendy. Communicating with her gave him great pleasure. And today, he could hardly hide his admiration when she came out of the premiere. Totally refreshed, he could not show his admiration for her, for he himself had not yet realized what a pleasant and joyous state of mind was entering his life. To Stephen, this feeling was absolutely new. The memory of greatness was still alive in his heart, but it was somewhat detached. And often that coldness gave them away from each other. Love for her had not warmed his heart, nor had it evoked such intoxicating warmth and joy as was now developing in the man's soul. These soft currents of magical feelings were rolling over his whole being. He wondered to himself where it came from in him and why it felt so good now. What was this miracle that had happened in his destiny? After all, Stephen could not even suppose that this young girl would catch his eye. The man even felt a slight pang of jealousy because he imagined what a dazzling impression Wendy would make tomorrow morning, and many men would throw interested glances at her. The next morning, he found Wendy alone in the waiting room. You look marvelous. Transformed. I can't tell a story. I can't describe it. Just a different woman, I must say. Beautiful. As he opened the door to his office, he stopped and made a gesture. A thumbs up. And this one, don't even doubt in the slightest that your fabulously good pantaloons burned. He winked at her. Burned, the girl smiled. He sat down at his desk and couldn't gather his thoughts. Wendy, the image of her and the girl had followed him like an obsession. Some kind of illumination had settled in his soul, boyish moods and resentments of the past. The sorrows and tragedies receded into the background. She was so bright, cheerful, and sincere that next to her did not want to play the role of macho. And most importantly, Stephen realized that with her he was real, without social husks, And such a man liked himself more, and that in general he liked to enjoy life and be happy. He suddenly wanted to embrace this thin and defenseless girl, tenderly kiss her on the cheek and shield her from all the misfortunes of this world. Her purity evoked in his soul. Her purity evoked in Stephen's soul an extraordinary delight and faith in the best. If fate had sent him such a tender and unsophisticated devoted girl, it meant that she had given him a chance to free himself from the shell and enjoy the strong moments of life. He was delighted with this new joyous and pure feeling. But I was afraid at the same time. He started acting like a boy. In the office he was stern and severe with Wendy, and in the evenings he'd stand guard outside her house and watch her from the window of his car. He laughed at himself for turning into a young bully. With his money and status in life, Stephen realized that he was acting like an idiot. Just a short time ago, he had been a risky chucklehead and teased Wendy every day. Now it seemed from the outside that he was avoiding her. But for now, he couldn't help his inner shyness. He was also kind of embarrassed to show his feelings in front of the secretary and the blonde. After all, she had unwittingly witnessed their relationship. In such a suspended state, Stephen stayed for about 2 months, until Nancy brought him out into the open. Stephen once turned to her when she was bringing important papers for him to sign. "You're breaking yourself all the time. Is your attitude towards the new girl on your face? Is it readable by your behavior?" The blonde smiled slyly, which is clearly visible to everyone. Scared Stephen. Well, not all of it. I could see the spark between a man and a woman right away. It's already a flame between you two. The man between us is dumbfounded. You mean her? Stephen, you're such a tough cookie. And now you're just smeared. But get your act together and eventually ask her out on a real date. Without all the poking and prodding. You think the man scratched the tip of his nose. Of course, to an outsider, the situation is obvious. You like each other, and it's time for you to be together. Nancy's words made Stephen's heart warm. He thought that after his idiotic proposal in the park, Wendy was not serious about him, and certainly not considering him as a suitor. But the blonde was so encouraging to his boss that he decided to talk to Wendy alone that very evening. "Look, I want to spend some time with you." Right off the bat, he started at the end of the day. "Yeah, Stephen, I'm ready." And Wendy had to pack a notebook and a tape recorder in her bag. "You don't get it. I want a personal relationship with you." "Oh, I'm not your equal." "Equal or not, thank God, it's up to me. Let's give it a shot of hope." Stephen turned to her. "What would it take?" "I'm inexperienced," embarrassed the girl. "Come on. You don't know. Your task is simple: to be yourself." Stephen smiled. "But also to go out with me. What do you say?" "I don't know what will come of it, but it will be a curious experiment. Let's assume that we have a tentative agreement. And what will be our first date?" the girl asked. "I'll think about it," Stephen promised. He understood perfectly well that the standard scheme of seduction in the case of Wendy will not work. One could, of course, force her to sleep with him by blackmail. But that seemed disgusting to him now. The man sincerely wanted to like the girl for real. Days passed in his thoughts, and he noted to himself that his activity was not as vigorous as usual. Stephen was distracted all the time by thoughts of the girl. At the end of the week, he peeked into the reception area, without his permission. Nancy, sneaking out early, but he was glad she'd shown wits and some sass. Now he and Wendy could not be interrupted by anyone. Stephen walked over to the girl and stared at her for somewhat longer than usual. Wendy jumped up from her chair. "Stephen, I'm not staying late today. I'm leaving. Just tidying up my desk." "Yeah, I can see that. Good for you. You're getting the hang of it. Except I asked you to call me Stephen when we're alone." "No, I'm gonna go by my first name in the office. What do you want to do?" "I was going to suggest something." Stephen's a little hesitant. "I'd like you to accompany me on a walk. It's the weekend. We could spend it outdoors. I've been wanting to go to a walking park for a long time. They say it's very cool, all Russian-style bogaters. So I want to invite you to come with me. I'd love to, but I promised my grandmother I'd go with her. We haven't been anywhere in a long time. I wanted to buy theater tickets. I've been thinking about it. You know what? Why don't you invite her to come with us? I think a woman would be interested too. It's not a long ride in comfort. Oh, that would be convenient for you, Wendy. If they call me, it's convenient. I'll give you a day to think about it tonight, and I want you to call me tomorrow. I hope it's a favorable decision. Wendy called her grandmother with her, and Vanessa gladly agreed. Oh, this is so exciting, she told her granddaughter. After all, it's been a long time since I've been anywhere, much less traveled. Yes, it is curious to see your boss, Stephen, what he is like outside of professional communication. You know, Grandma, I can't understand him. Sometimes he's simple and kind, and sometimes he's weirdly avoidant. He pretends not to notice me at all. Well, trust me, in my experience. Wendy, are you deeply sympathetic to this gentleman? Come on, he's so rich, he has so many beauties at his disposal. Yes, my dear, affairs of the heart. They're not even capitalistic. Rich, not rich. Successful, not successful. That principle doesn't work here. You're young. Forgive me, granddaughter, and you don't have much wisdom. But I'll give you an example. He's the neighbor downstairs. You can't take your eyes off him. A handsome man. I saw women running after him before my eyes. They were ready to tie the shoelaces on his sneakers. A girl. A little redhead, still puny, but just classy. But he's talkative, and he loves her. Who doesn't look at the pretties? She's the only one he's ever wanted. So it's okay. They're good parents in their family. They cured 3 of them. It would seem that they're completely different people, and even after they cheat on each other, they stick together. I had a friend who was like that. Here's her story. When she was young, handsome Kim got tuberculosis. So one day he comes home with a voucher for recuperative treatment. And the next day a woman with charm, like a sin, meets the chief accountant with his work and starts thanking her for taking such care of her husband. Say, thank you for the allotted voucher. The woman's eyes in a pile, like a duck, a voucher. Never had one. Valka sprints home and goes into her husband's pocket, and there's a treacherous bag of anger next to the voucher. Say, I'm waiting for you, my dear, my beloved, in such and such a room with a NATO reception, treatment of sexual recuperation. Gathering all his scorned honor in a fist, rushed mother-in-law in that sanatorium entered the room, waiting to separate from breakfast, and on the bed sees knitting, scarf, shawl under it. And there's a teddy bear from her mistress. Our Valia read outright. What love? What love? She sits, grieving, rubbing the umbrella in her hands. That's when the villain comes out. He meets his mistress, and he kicks his lawful wife in the legs. Forgive me, I'm not to blame. He came himself, woman ball, but proud stepped over the prostrate body, not forgetting a couple of times to kick the rival on the head of the husband unfaithful, kicked her out on arrival, and then took her mother's advice to take her back. Who would want such a trained lady? And with 2 kids. Kim never got tuberculosis again, and there are plenty of such examples, my dear. And there are successful women and beautiful as dolls from head to toe, well-groomed, and at work honor and a tight purse. But there is no female happiness. Lonely. And for a woman it's right. She will not rest until she realizes herself as a wife and mother. That's our nature, so don't look at his wealth, and don't get scared. Act natural. Maybe he is tired of these capricious and rich kings and pulled the man to something real. You're guileless, and you're straight and beautiful. I'm the one with the granddaughter. You don't even need makeup. Everything about you is tender, soft, and feminine. Oh, thank you, Grandma, for your kind words. I believe you. I guess it's all true. How many heart-to-heart talks have we had with you? You've never been wrong once. Always right. It's not just intuition, it's logic. I'll tell you the signs, and you apply them to the chief and you'll know his intentions. Many young ladies often wonder about the attitude of their chosen one, whether he is keen and loves sincerely and deeply. If such questions disturb your soul, you need to analyze the actions of your partner. There are several aspects of a man's behavior by which you can judge his feelings. He notices the merits and often talks about them. He is really sincerely attached to a woman if he evaluates her comprehensively, admires the appearance, character, abilities, achievements of his chosen one. He notices not only beautiful legs, but also a sharp mind, kind disposition, a subtle sense of humor, the ability to support in critical moments. Often admires a woman. He looks at a special, not oily, full of passion eyes, but warmly and with tenderness. Many men like to look at their favorites, furtively enjoying their beauty and grace from afar or while sleeping. But close eye contact does not strain them. They do not hide their gaze and do not look away. Sensitive to change. He always pays attention to a new hairstyle or outfit beloved. Subtly feels the changes in her mood and behavior. Generous on compliments and on praise. She positively evaluates the desire for development in the profession. Well, or culinary experiments in the home kitchen. He wants to be close. He lets the chosen one into his space, offers to meet on his territory, gladly shows his home, office, dacha, strives to spend with his beloved as much time as possible. He is comfortable in her society in a busy work schedule. A man like this will always find time. He will call or write a message. And if men prefer to meet in hotels or in the apartment the partner comes up with a lot of excuses about communicating at home, rarely calls and writes, so he is not in a hurry to let her into his life. He has to be patient. He's willing to wait for his lady. That goes for everything. Does the girl dress up for a date? Is she late for a meeting or pulling for intimacy? If a man is reverent about the chosen one, he does not rush her with important decisions. When a woman really hooked him, he will be patient and show patience, whether she is capriciously uncollected or not in the mood. Wants to be liked. He makes an effort to look good, pays maximum attention to his hair and clothes, chooses perfume carefully, wants to become closer in the spiritual sphere, so he is actively interested in the worldview, hobbies, friendship of the chosen one. When meeting, he shows gallantly, demonstrates his best qualities. He also values her opinion. If the partner plans a long-term relationship with his chosen one, he listens to her advice when choosing clothes and food. He discusses with his beloved creative projects and prospective plans, allows you to evaluate his actions, performances of movement. In a positive way, he perceives critical comments, and if he considers them fair, he avoids blunders in the future. He also shortens the distance. It is pleasant for him to be in the same space with his chosen one. Therefore, he will not build the boundaries of communication with her, and the desire to be closer is well traced at a random meeting. A loving man opens his arms wide. He smiles and begins to move towards her, not hiding his joy. But if he crosses his arms on his chest, scratches the back of his head, and his smile looks strained, the presence of a lady is not part of his plans. With his entire appearance, he will make it clear that meetings are better planned and limited in time. He demonstrates his achievements. He gladly shows his beloved all the merits of his life. A special disposition and trust are indicated by those cases when a man offers his lady to use his phone, tablet, put on his shirt, try on sunglasses, sit behind the wheel of his favorite car. He spares his beloved's feelings, twiddling his thumbs. He tries to avoid conflicts or situations that upset the chosen one, will not play on her weaknesses and pain points. The first to initiate reconciliation at a rift will stop a protracted dispute. He is sensitive to the tears of his beloved, so he will always embrace her, will calm her down. He will not allow strangers to hurt the feelings of his partner. You know he is ready to change his lifestyle. Here, if a man is interested in a woman, he will roll mountains for her. He will replay plans, take an extraordinary vacation. If necessary, he'll come in the middle of the night. And if there are no feelings, he will come up with 1,000 obstacles to deny her a date or help. The partner of the one has full information about the interests, hobbies, and tastes of the woman he loves. He knows what books she reads, what wine she drinks, what genres of movies she prefers, her favorite flowers and perfume. Without serious intentions, a man's interests are limited to the framework of sexual relations. He easily forgets about things that are meaningful to her. He is sincere and frank. A successful man wants to see in his chosen one not only a beloved, but also a friend. He will trust her with his innermost thoughts and dreams. He will willingly tell about childhood offenses, favorite hobbies, relationships with parents, friends, colleagues. He is honest with the chosen one. If the truth can hurt her, he would rather keep silent than deliberately lie. Includes in the plans for the future. In conversation, a man begins to operate often with the pronoun we. He no longer speaks of himself in the singular person. Now it sounds more often we will decide, we will see, we will think, we will come. So he subconsciously demonstrates readiness for a joint life with the chosen one. By the way, he is attentive in intimate relationships and intimacy. He tries not only to satisfy himself, but also to reveal the possibilities to his partner. First of all, to make it pleasant for her. After the end of intimacy, he does not withdraw at all, but maintains bodily contact. He is open to hugs and touches. He is ready to change for the sake of his beloved. And if a woman is dear to a man, he can give up the most bad habits and will control himself. In order to please her, he will share her hobbies. He will tolerate her friends and relatives, even if he does not like them. He shows care. Serious attitude to a woman is manifested by a desire to help her, that is, to be useful to her. The man is responsive to her requests and zealously takes up the solution of any, sometimes insignificant problem situations. Sacrifice personal time and professional interests. You know he doesn't tolerate competition. He wants to be the only one in his beloved's life. Becomes irritated at the sight of potential rivals. He can't stand comparisons with other men. He is satisfied if he manages to make a good impression on the chosen one and is the first to give her support. He likes it when a woman consults him when making important decisions. She values his point of view. Next, he takes care of the expenses. A man is not in a hurry to pay for a partner who does not interest him, but for his beloved, he will not spare anything. He is constantly invested in her beauty and health. Pays for the election in restaurant stores, provides her with a decent life. This is very important for him. Be a leader in the material sphere. Show willingness to take on any financial obligations of the beloved. He is not afraid of responsibility. He willingly tries on the role of the head of the family, is ready to make important decisions and implement them, voices a desire to marry, become a father, takes care of his loved ones, introduces his parents and relatives. When a man decides to take this step, a woman can be sure that his intentions are the most serious. She is the only contender for his heart. He will gladly get acquainted and with her relatives will try to make a pleasant impression on them. He is eager to take the relationship to the next level. A man interested in a short sexual encounter. He constantly comes up with some ridiculous excuses, preventing the reunion. And if his intentions are serious, he moves the relationship along. After meeting his parents, he offers to come over, and then he proposes. Vanessa finished and looked intently at her granddaughter. "How much is similar?" she remarked with surprise. "That's what I told you. So let's go, since we're invited. Besides, I can see you like him too. I don't understand him, but I can see he's got a good heart." "All right. Well, let's see the boss outside the office." The young woman laughed wickedly. The trip was indeed a pleasant surprise for them. On the road, Stephen made a lot of jokes. He was alert. Wendy liked the fact that he did not ignore her grandmother's wishes. It seemed to her that the chief became sympathetic to Vanessa. So, in casual conversation, they reached the place. Before their eyes spread out a huge natural park with powerful paths, with majestic towers, castles, fortresses and shuttles between them, corridors and carts. The charioteer gave a few hundred and got to any object with a breeze. And in the center of the cultural site, on a high mountain, stood the majestic figure of a new serpent, which at the appointed time spewed out streams of fire. The travelers visited all the art objects they liked, had lunch in a stylized Korchevnikov's, admired the final exit of the old Russian dragon, bathed in the local river. In general, they were satisfied. Happy and tired, they went on their way back. Stephen was jubilant. Wendy had spent the whole day with him. She smiled, took him under her arm, and discussed her impressions. Vanessa, too, had made a favorable impression on him. He expected to see a decrepit old woman, but met a vigorous, neat woman. He could talk to her on any subject. With these two ladies, he felt at home freely and easily. He didn't even have to control his emotions or restrain his impulses. He too acted like a child and enjoyed the fabulous outing. In the late afternoon, Stephen delivered Wendy and her grandmother home and went to his own place. He was light and happy at heart. The man was content and caught himself thinking that he felt good about being able to give such a trip to the girl his heart desired. After this trip, their relationship began to develop rapidly. There was warmth, respect, and care. Stephen was thrilled to realize that Wendy also cared for him. It gave him so much energy that he felt as if he were not walking, but simply floating above the ground. Time passed, and gradually they grew closer and closer. And soon one remarkable incident occurred which enabled Stephen to be convinced of the correctness of his choice. When the city was covered with snowy winter and cold winds, forgot in its streets, he caught a bad cold, with a high fever and skinny chills gripping his entire body. At the height of the infection, he called Nancy and told her he would be gone for several days. The man's condition kept worsening, and soon he slipped into oblivion alone in the apartment, completely helpless. Stephen perceived the sounds of the television and telephone as if through a jenna of thick fog. He was no longer able to even stick a thermometer under his arm. The patient was losing touch with reality. The only one who sounded the alarm was Wendy. She convinced Nancy to give her a spare key to Stephen's apartment. It was kept in the study just in case. She rushed over to her boss's house. The girl was shocked by what she saw. She immediately called an ambulance, and Stephen was hospitalized. Wendy arrived at his apartment just in time, because the timely treatment helped him to avoid complications. According to the doctor, they were sure to threaten a man weakened by infection. Every day the girl visited the patient and made sure to bring fruit. And hello from Vanessa. Feeling her care and presence, Stephen recovered quickly. Soon he was discharged, although he spent another week at home. During this time, the man got so used to the closeness of his favorite girl that he did not want to part with her even for a while. He came to the realization that he would like to see Wendy as his wife. He needed her like air. On his return to the office, Stephen set to work with renewed vigor. He decided to propose to Wendy. The night before, the man left his office and approached her workplace. "Wendy, I need to discuss some work issues with you, but not in the office, but tonight at the Orpheus restaurant. I'd like you to be ready at 9 o'clock. I'll pick you up. Dress code. Parade objections will not be accepted." That's not a request. That's an instruction. Wendy was surprised at the way he spoke to her, but did not object. "It will be carried out to the best of my ability." "Not to worry," she replied theatrically, continuing to type on the keyboard. When they arrived at the restaurant, a table had already been set for them. Wendy had been with Stephen in various places before and was therefore surprised by the unusual service. In the middle, she saw a beautiful vase with a voluminous flower arrangement. "You said it was a business occasion. Why flowers?" The girl was surprised. "And this you will find out later." "Mademoiselle," he slyly smiled. Then the wonderful voice of Paul McCartney was heard in one of the speakers. Stephen stretched out his hand to meet her and offered to dance. They twirled around the floor. Stephen gently embraced her and could not believe it was real. Sunny and warm vibes emanated from her. Wonderful hair spread across her shoulders. Her blue eyes glowed with happiness, and her body gave out desires. The song ended. He gallantly led her to a table. Wendy sat down. "You know," Stephen began, I'm frankly admiring you right now. I don't think there's a more beautiful woman in the world. I'll tell you the truth. You're probably the only woman I have any genuine respect for. You know everything about me. I'm no saint. Sometimes I've been ridiculous and stupid. Yes, I remember your indecent proposal." Wendy laughed. "And I remember what you were wearing at the hour of our first intimate date." Stephen smiled broadly. "But I'm grateful to your outfit for drawing my attention to you. But the time has come when you are not shy of me at all, and I want you to be my wife." He opened his palm with a dainty ring hidden in it. "Well, I'm a saint. All that remains is to ask Vanessa's blessing." Wendy raised her matchless cornflower eyes to him, and he saw in them so much love and tenderness that his heart leaped with happiness. "Can you imagine? I agree. Because from the very beginning I couldn't refuse any of your offers, even from indecent." The girl squinted slyly. "That's the effect you have on me. You could say, hypnotically. I am ready to sacrifice all my principles and morals. Vanessa has long ago figured you out. 6 months ago, and you charmed her from the first moment you met her. So I take it that's a complete agreement." "That's right. You, Stephen, understand. Give me your ring." Stephen complied with his beloved's request, and on this occasion they drank 2 bottles of champagne, then had a delicious dinner and several times twirled in a slow dance. Stephen remembered how unsophisticated Wendy used to be, and he desired her more than anything else in the world. Very delicately and carefully, he was teaching her to open herself up to passion. But it wasn't even about intimacy. Although their physical union was getting better and better each time, Stephen felt in Wendy an absolute kinsman. This beautiful girl had found a place for him in her soul. She was truly his other half. Stephen felt responsible for a woman for the first time and did not avoid her. He was ready to fight back hard for encroaching on his girlfriend's insecurities. No one in his presence would offend Wendy by word or deed. She was completely under his protection, and it was from her that the man felt a mental and physical togetherness that could only be dreamed of. How had this girl managed to win him over? He did not understand. What fascinated him was Wendy's sincerity and selflessness. She really gave Stephen the kind of attention and care that he had dreamed of as a child and received only from his father. Only now in this affair with Wendy, he realized that Prochor had managed to plant in him his best life principles. So he valued simple human values, mutual love, respect, sincere care for each other. A difficult childhood and frivolous youth pushed all this into the background and replaced it with phantom attachments. But neither success nor money could make Stephen happy. Only his relationship with Wendy had brought harmony and peace to his soul. Only now he realized what a pleasure it is to live in balance with himself, when not passions tear your soul, but tenderness and delight. They fill it all around. Nature, people, and everyday affairs become completely different. The very perception of the world changes. Stephen looked at her now with gratitude. Yes, it is not an easy world, and it is not simple, but it is what it is. When the fire of true love burns inside you, then philosophically perceive the difficulties and vicissitudes of life. Indulge in other people's shortcomings goes irritability, nervousness, using sometimes envy of other people's happiness. Stephen now realized how much good lurked in his soul, and there was no one to give it to. In fact, no one was taking it. And Wendy really needed his care, attention, and adoration. Her adoring gaze reflected her love for him. She must have sensed something real that had always been hidden in him. The girl trusted Stephen so infinitely that to deceive her, he could not deceive her. He realized clearly that Wendy was the cornerstone through which he had come to love life itself in all its incarnations. With her, he had discovered one immutable truth. He was giving himself to her and deriving great pleasure from it. Next to her, he became the real, the very sincere and desperate boy in whom his father had infinitely believed. The morning they met together in the large and bright bedroom, Stephen opened himself even more to Wendy. Putting his arms around her, he said, "You do not even realize how amazing you are, outwardly seemingly weak and fragile, but at heart strong and kind. You're the one who made me a better person. And that's not just a buzzword. It's the truth. I not only fell in love with a beautiful woman, but through you I became real. I got my self-respect back. Gone are the resentments, the fears. Through you, I've come to love the world. I have no complaints about it. It's given me such happiness. You have no idea how good it feels to be with you. I can't explain it to you, but I can show you. And he brought it to her lips in a passionate kiss. After a while, their private life became such that Stephen was breathtaking. For this, he was grateful to Wendy. She enjoyed learning all the intricacies of a close relationship between a man and a woman. Stephen sometimes became wildly frightened that he could pass it by. That and sobbing on the bench curls. He thanked God and fate that by some instinct he had seen the gorgeous woman hidden in this humble poor girl. Wendy had turned out to be a splendid wife. She was not afraid to quit her job and become a housewife, organizing everyday life and recreation for her beloved. Brought her great pleasure. The woman did not regret this step because one by one they had children, a healthy, strong boy, Rick with the same marvelous eyes, just like their mother's, and then a searing brunette with clear brown eyes, just like Daddy. They say girls who look like their fathers grow up happy, and vice versa. Boys who are lucky enough to inherit their mother's looks also become lucky. Stephen felt perfectly at home as a husband and father. He felt at ease, actively realized in the professional sphere, and was the main provider in the family. Even in his strict schedule, he was sure to allocate time to communicate with children when they grew up. On an equal footing with his wife, he attended parent-teacher conferences, participated in school life, took them to sections and additional classes. Vanessa lived to see his great-grandchildren and had time to nurse them. This kind woman passed away at the age of 90. Her soul departed peacefully to the kingdom of heaven in her sleep. During her lifetime, she refused to move in with the young and remained in her old home. Stephen did his best to make it more comfortable and sympathetic. He showed her respect to the end of the woman's life and considered her a kindred spirit. Thanks to his personal happiness, he was able to let go of his resentments toward his mother and remember the isolated moments of happiness she was able to give him. Celebrating the anniversary of their acquaintance, the Faber family recalled the incident of the indecent proposal and all the consequences that followed. A grateful heart now beat in Stephen's chest. He had grown to love the rain. One day, he came out of the office and realized that a downpour was about to break out. The scent was hard to describe. It smelled, especially of variety in foreign lands, and intensified with every minute. A lightning bolt flashed, like a flaming branch in a fire. It was followed by thunder. Droplets swiftly approached the ground and bombarded leaves, flowers, and grasses. Music was playing in my head. Stephen looked at the rain and saw a miracle. He admired how the raindrops gently touched the delicate greenery and tenderly, but washed away the flowers and hid in the thick grass. A heavy rain filled the street. It was in moderation, moving in rhythm and ringing. The August rain is young, and he cannot understand the wisdom of autumn. Men invite his youth and realized that he himself had entered the season of wise maturity. Stephen felt like raising his arms towards him and shouting to be heard. I'm a happy man. I feel crazy good. I love and am loved. Suddenly, the sky brightened, and the sun appeared from behind the clouds. Stephen, satisfied with the games of nature, and himself looked around and was pleased with the result. It seemed to him that the trees were younger and the flowers smelled sweeter. He looked up. The clouds were flying away, slowly turning into intricate shades, and a bright star named the sun lit up. And we will wait for the pure world.